Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live. I'm happy to kick things. You know what? I should probably have a microphone over here. All right, let's try that again. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live. I'm happy to kick things off this morning for our day of Lightroom. That's right. We got a brand new Lightroom update today, and it's Lightroom across the board. So it's Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, Lightroom on mobile, Lightroom on web, and I hope to show you examples of each as we start off this session for the next 24 minutes and 12 seconds. All right, so with that said, thanks for joining me. I see some folks over in the chat already. Hey, Andrew. Hey, Victoria. Hey, Cody Bear, our moderator. And of course, more people will be joining in as we go. People usually ask, hey, if I can't stay or can't watch the whole thing all day, can I come back and watch the replays? Absolutely. I love replay numbers just as well as live numbers. So Sean, welcome. And let's go ahead without further ado, because I only have a few minutes. Let's kick things off and let's talk about what's new in Lightroom. So I've got my notes up. Just switch over to, I'm going to start off with one of the biggest things, and that is the brand new Generative Remove. Now, I'm going to show it to you three different examples because I'm going to show it to you on three different platforms. And the only one I'm not showing it to you on is web, but it is on web as well, because you're going to see web a little bit later. I got a cool thing that I learned about web that I'm interested to try out. So anyway, we've got Lightroom open. So this is some of you refer to this as the cloud version. I will, after I show the things that are the same across the board, I will show you things that are specific to each application. So we'll see some things that are specific to Lightroom, some things that are specific to Lightroom Classic, some things that are specific to Lightroom Web. So everything I'm showing you so far is across the board, including Camera Raw. So let's start off with an image that I showed during my sneak at Adobe Max London. And we're going to go into this photo. And again, I'm in Lightroom. I could do the same thing in Classic, Mobile, Web, same thing, same tool. And it's now the Remove tool. So this is, and it's giving me the little, hey, do you want to try it now? Yes, I do. And yes, I agree. So this is showing me that I have what we used to refer to as the healing brush. It is now renamed the Remove. And the Remove works the way it always did. So if you just want to remove a simple, quick spot, you can just click and it'll remove that spot. And it's great for simple, fast things locally on your device. But if you got something more complicated, chances are you've not been trying to do that in Lightroom because it's just Lightroom's tools don't do it. So you head over to Photoshop to do it. And that's cool. That's great a workflow. I've been doing that workflow for years. But more and more, I'm finding that the Lightroom team is making it possible so I don't have to keep jumping to Photoshop for every single thing I need to do that Lightroom can't handle, because Lightroom can handle more. So let's start off with this one. So I'm going to go ahead and there's two checkboxes here. There's one for generative AI and there's one for object aware. I'm going to turn them both on because I want to show you what this does. Now with object aware and with object aware on, when I paint like this and I let go, the first thing it generates is a mask. That's because I have object aware turned on. If I didn't have object aware turned on, it would just be the same shape as what I painted. So when would I use one versus the other? I would use the mask for an object like this that's very defined in the subject and there's a very defined background. Like if it were against clouds, I wouldn't care. It doesn't need to be that defined. But it's against those napkins in the background and I kind of want to keep that same structure. So you'll turn that on or off as needed. That's the object aware is not always needed because sometimes generative remove works better with a broader selection. So you really don't want it as tight. I'm also going to make my brush smaller. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull down here and get that little stem. And this also is giving me a chance to get anything I might have missed before I go ahead and click apply. So you add and subtract as well. Now, hitting apply, that's where it actually does the generative remove. It actually goes to the cloud. It does the generation, just like in Photoshop's generative fill. And again, you've got the choice now. For things that are quick, generative or the remove tool, and things that are not so quick, not easy, or more complicated, generative remove. And you still get, just like in Photoshop, you get the three choices of which one you like best. I'm digging that one. And you notice that it repaired the base of it. The napkins still look good. It's like the sign was never there. Now, I could get out of this and let it sync, but I'm just going to head over to Lightroom Classic, and I've got the same photo. Now, of course, this one's not done yet because it hasn't synced, but I'm not going to do this part because we already saw that. I'm going to head over to the Develop module. So I switched from Lightroom Desktop to Lightroom Classic because I know some people would like to see it and they like, where are you now? I'm in Lightroom Classic. So I switched between the two Lightrooms. And now I'm in Lightroom Classic, and someone said, well, I remember I already got a comment. Where is it in Lightroom Classic? Because I showed it on mobile. It's the same tool. So if I go to the tool here, same two checkboxes, and I'm just going to turn off the, you know what? Let's turn them both off. Let's see what the difference would be. Because if I wanted to get rid of this guy's hands, which are very distracting, reaching into the scene, and I don't have Generative Remove turned on, this is what I would get. So let's go ahead and get all of this brushed in. I get all of this, go all the way around. And yep, all of that. And okay, now I'm gonna let go. And when I let go, it just does it because it's the old remove tool. And it just, like, you would never live with that. That just doesn't look good. It's not blending very well because that tool was never designed for something this complicated. So even though I didn't have Generative Remove turned on, this is another tip. If you think you might be able to get away with the remove tool, try it first. In this case, I can't. So I don't have to start over. I can click on that and I can go ahead and turn on Generative AI, and it will apply Generative AI to the area that I already brushed. So it'll do the Generative Remove, and I don't have to undo and rebrush it again with Generative Remove checked. You can enable it after the fact and get that nice clean result that I got there, including three choices, and it just added some cheese in there. But I'm gonna go ahead and go with just the table. That's what I wanted. So that's Lightroom, Lightroom Classic. I know what you're thinking. Terry, can you do this on your phone? Can you do this on your handheld? Can you do this on your iPad? Yes. So let me switch over to my, my phone. I've got Lightroom running on my phone. Just updated it last night. Updated Lightroom Classic this morning. Updated Lightroom this morning. And I'm not going to do the same photo. You've seen that photo now a couple of times. I'm going to do this one, which is one I made a TikTok and a reel of this one because I thought it was pretty cool. This is the classic example of when you want to use this. Someone photobombed your photo and it ruined an otherwise great selfie moment with all your friends. And you want to say, you know what, you're funny, but I need you out of my shot. So I'm going to go ahead and just tap the remove tool. And the same thing, I have a on-off Generative AI and it's on right now. The only difference, two differences. Number one, I don't have the object aware on mobile at this point. Number two, I don't have it doesn't wait. So as soon as I brush and let go, it just does it. Whereas before I had to click apply on desktop. So just keep that in mind that as you brush, as soon as you let go of your brush, it will actually do it. So again, this is all early access. I'm hoping they bring those two things to mobile as well, but whatever. All right, so let's do it for now. And I get to choose my brush size before I start brushing, which is kind of nice. And let's go ahead and start brushing. And let's get this guy all brushed in and his hand over her head. And I think I got it all. I just want to make sure I get it all before I let go. Yep, that looks good. I let go and it starts processing. And people always ask, does Generative Remove or Generative Fill or Generative Expand need internet connection? Yes, it does. So the Remove tool does not, but Generative Remove does because it's actually processing this in the cloud. So this is processing it on Adobe servers in the cloud. And we got a new guy in there, but thankfully we get a refine option. And I can go ahead and switch to the next result. And her hair got a little bigger there. I think this is the best one. So that way I get a nice, clean Generative Remove. And if I didn't like any of them, by the way, I can hit refresh and do 3 more. So I can keep going if I don't like the results that I got. But I do like that result. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And that is my before. I'm holding down just holding down my finger on the image. And that is my after with the Generative Remove. Yes, it does work on the iPad. All right, so across the board. Everywhere you see the word Lightroom as of today, it works. So Lightroom Desktop, Lightroom Classic, Lightroom Web, Lightroom Phone, Lightroom iPad, yes, and Camera Raw. Okay, so that is the new Generative Remove. All right, so now let's switch back over to my desktop. And in my desktop, I'm going to switch back over to Lightroom. And we're going to get out of this image. And once we're out of that image, and I can see I want to remove him so bad, but I'm just going to go ahead and move on to my next image. I could do Generative Remove all day long, but we got limited time. So let's go ahead and switch over to this image. I've shown this image a couple times. I showed it at the Max keynote, and I showed it in my reel today. I think it's just a cool image to show it, because rarely do you actually even see a photo where the background is this in focus, especially if you took it with a professional camera, because your professional camera is going to give you that shallow depth of field. But in this case, I don't have that shallow depth of field look. Everything's nice and sharp, and that's okay if that's what you wanted. But we introduced a technology called lens blur, and lens blur, yep. I love it how I get all those initial, hey, you want to try this out? Lens blur was early release. So it went from early release to not being early release, which is what we call general availability. Now Generative Remove is an early release, meaning it's an early beta for you to play around with, test, give us feedback. And so you did that with lens blur, and now this is the release version of lens blur. So things we fixed, there's an updated model to avoid holes and bad selection. So like, for example, a hole under someone's arm that wouldn't get selected now should get selected properly. Changes to the refinement brush, making it more visible. Batch workflow options, so now you can copy the blur and paste it on multiple images that needed the same blur, like you maybe took a burst shot and you need multiple images to have the same thing, and we're going to get into some presets as well. All right, so let's go ahead and turn this on. I'm just going to go ahead and apply it, and that will calculate and use AI to figure out the depth. So to figure out the visual, it will figure out the depth map for this image to figure out what should be in focus and what should not be in focus, or what should be in less focus, I should say. So it did that, and you even have a visualized depth so you can see what the AI did, and that's pretty cool. So everything towards me in color is in focus. Everything further back in the darker purples is out of focus. And you can, of course, change the blur amount. I'm going to zoom in real quick here so we can see it. So this is before. Oh, hold on. That's before, that's after. So just seeing that real quick, that's how much of a difference it made right off the bat. Now, over here on the right-hand side, underneath the blur amount, you can make it less blurry, for example. Maybe you don't need it to be that strong, but you can also change the shape of the bokeh. So I like the little circles. I like to be able to see through them. That's pretty cool. I like those. But you have different bokeh shapes to choose based on your preference. That is totally up to you. You can also change the focal range. So I can drag the whole slider up back and forth to control, now he's out of focus and the background's in focus. And I can also just drag it so that it's shorter, meaning a more shallow depth of field, or it's more exaggerated, so it takes longer to get out of focus. So you can do it either way. All right, so now, one more thing, you can also have the refinement brushes. I'm gonna go ahead and twirl those down. So a lot of people miss this. I remember showing this to a friend of mine, and he didn't know those brushes were there. So you have a focus brush and a blur brush. So this allows you to pick and choose what areas of the image you think should have been in focus, or areas of the image you think should have been out of focus. So for example, maybe a hand got too much in focus or too out of focus, and you can go ahead and brush that back in. Now, just to demonstrate it, I wouldn't do it on this photo, but just to show you what it does, let's say I wanted to put this building back in focus. Maybe I'm trying to create a story where he's looking at this building and this building's in focus even though the rest are not. So I made up an example of when I might do that, even though I probably wouldn't do that because that just looks weird. But you have the option to do that if you want. So that was just me taking the focus brush and brushing that part of the image back in focus. All right, let me undo that because that looks weird. All right, so that is the new lens blur. And like I said, it is copy and pastable across multiple images. And in Lightroom Classic, of course, you can auto sync it to multiple images. So again, this is one of those. It's across the board. It's on mobile. It's on Lightroom. It's in Lightroom Classic. Lens blur was early access and is now generally available with some performance and quality enhancements. All right, next up, let's get into some specific. Oh, one more. Hang on. One more. I'll go over to Lightroom Classic and do this. I'm trying to divvy it up so I'm showing the product in both. So we switched from Lightroom back over to Lightroom Classic. Again, the same concepts. I'm going to go into this image. Actually, not that one. Do I have a different one of those two? I thought, yeah, I do. Here it is. This image. I'm going to go into the develop module. This is a stock image, by the way. I didn't take this one. And I'm going to go into the presets, because now there are presets for, you guessed it, adaptive presets for the blur background. So this means that these were all generated by Adobe, but lens blur is something you can add to your own presets. So you can make your own presets with the lens blur settings that you want and apply those to any images you want in the future. So with this said, I can go in and say that, hey, I want a strong blur background. And when I click, now watch the lens blur panel, I didn't turn it on, but just by clicking the preset, I'm telling it to figure out what the background of this photo is and give it these settings. So these are the settings from the preset. So you can choose, here's the before, look at the lights. That's the after, before, after, based on a preset. And it figured out what the subject was. The subjects are nice and sharp. And it kept the subjects in focus but blurring the background. So I can say, you know what? And these are all different sets. So I can make it a swirl. I can make it a circle. And again, these are not really showing a lot because we don't have a lot of little lights, but it would show the different shapes, and I can make it more subtle. So less of a blur that's very subtle compared to the strong one. And again, if these presets, hey, I want something in between subtle and strong, make your own. You can make your own presets. All right, so that is lens blur on both Lightroom and Lightroom Classic and mobile and web, and also, of course, the new adaptive presets for blur background across the board. All right, so now let's get into some specific features in each platform. So in Lightroom, so I'm going to switch back to Lightroom now, and I'm going to show you some specific things here that are specific to just Lightroom. So everything I showed you up to this point, Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, mobile, web. Now I'm showing you something that's just in Lightroom. And in Lightroom specific, there's a new archive workflow. So for example, let me search for all my 5-star images in this album. And let's say, for example, I don't need this image and I don't need this image anymore in the cloud. They're taking up space. I don't need them anymore. We hear that all the time. How can I remove images I don't want in the cloud anymore? They're taking up space and I don't need them anymore. And there was always a way to do it, but it wasn't as straightforward. It wasn't as easy. So now the team made it an easy option. You can just go in and select the photos you want, 100 photos, 1,000 photos, how many ever you want, 2 photos, 1 photo, and right click, and there is a new archive photos locally. So what does this mean? It means take these 2 selected photos, take them out of Lightroom, put them on a folder on my hard drive that I choose, and therefore from that point on, I'm responsible for them. If that hard drive crashes, they're gone. If I don't back them up and something happens, they're gone. But I'm now responsible for the storage of them, just like a Lightroom Classic user would be. So I'm going to say archive these 2 photos locally, and then it's going to give me the choice. Where do you want to put them? What drive, what NAS, what external drive, where do you want them? You would browse for that drive. Do you want to organize them into one folder or by date? Okay. Do you want to, if there's an existing photo in the same folder with the same name, what do you want to do? Keep it or replace it? So I would, unless you're sure, I would say keep both, because in case you don't know. And then this is pretty cool. It's going to show you how much space that's going to free up in the cloud. So that's archive photos, archive videos, archive stuff out of the cloud, back down to your computer, and free up cloud space. Now, I found some interesting things about this from the Lightroom team. When it does that, it doesn't remove them from Lightroom immediately. It puts them in your deleted items folder in Lightroom Cloud. So they don't count towards your space anymore, and you got 60 days to retrieve them in case something goes wrong. But after 60 days, then they're deleted for good. You can also do this for an album. So you can say, archive this album locally. And when you do that, now it's going to give you the third choice of keep the album structure. So if you selected multiple albums, then it would make folders for each album and put the photos in the folders on your hard drive before it removes them out of Lightroom. So just know that you can do it on individual photos. You can do it at the album level. You can do it for multiple albums. All right, and you should probably be able to do it at the folder level too. Yep, archive folder locally. So that's a whole folder of all these albums. If I chose to do that, then I would get the option. Oh, it's probably calculating all that because it didn't pop up right away. All right, I may have gotten myself in trouble with that, but that's okay. We can move on. All right, next up. Oh, this is pretty cool. So I did my search for my 5 stars, right? These are all my 5-star photos and video. And these are my ones from London. And I can go in and I can go to the 3-dot menu. And I can start a slideshow. That's right. Slideshow is coming over to Lightroom. Lightroom Classic has always had an extensive slideshow feature that lets you put music to your images, export it out in different formats, so forth and so on. This is none of that. This is just a basic slideshow. It's a start. So when I invoke the slideshow, it starts playing a slideshow and it goes full screen. And when you move your mouse, you get a little controller here. You can advance manually, you can pause it, you can stop it, and you can also set the whether it's going to loop, and you can also set the speed. So I can say, make it go faster. And now that's the new speed for the slideshow. And I from what I calculated, fast is 3 seconds. Medium is 5 seconds. I don't know. I didn't go slower, so I don't know how many seconds that would be. All right. So slideshow. It's a basic slideshow for those that always wanted a slideshow in Lightroom. All right, real quick. Last two in Lightroom specifically. So here's a video. And this is a video that I shot with my drone. So when I play it back, you see the cars moving. You'll start to see the drone move. You'll see the Tower Bridge there standing still, hopefully not moving. And we're just panning the bridge. All right, so you could do a lot of Lightroom kind of things to it. Now in Lightroom, you also have the ability for the first time. Let me, I didn't reset this from before. Let's reset it. That's why it looked weird. There we go. You have the ability now to use curves on a video. So you can make your videos that get the lighting just right if you're a curves user. I'm not really a big curves user. I use all the other settings, but for those who love curves, you've now got curves across a video. So as that video is playing, the curve has been applied to all the frames in that video just like that. Okay, so that's curves. Last but not least in Lightroom, before we hop over to Lightroom Classic, is you've got, now you got you always had 2 grids. So that's the grid that shows you no space between the photos. Then you hit G again, you get the actual space, more like Lightroom Classic. And then you'll notice that you have the option now, not the option, you now see the file names. That may lead to batch renaming someday, who knows? But now the file names are displayed in Lightroom in this version of the grid. Okay, now switch over to Lightroom Classic real quick. Lightroom Classic gets Sony tethering, that's right. So if you've got one of these cameras, you should now be able to plug it in directly into Lightroom Classic and tether for the first time. That means when you click, the image comes down your USB cable right into Lightroom Classic. And we've always had support since we've had tethering for various Canon and Nikon models. And now the team has worked on making it available for Sony cameras. And that's the first batch of cameras that it works with. Okay, next up, Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic gets a whole new sync architecture. So a whole new engine under syncing to make syncing more reliable. It gets an export filter. So what's this filter mean? If I go to my metadata, I switch one of my tabs to exported files, And now I can see which photos or videos have been exported and which ones have not. So that way I can pick and choose based on the scenario what I need to see which ones I've already exported, which ones have I not, so forth and so on. All right, there is one more feature in Lightroom Web. I'm not going to get time to show it because I'm already out of time, but that is the ability to go from Lightroom Web to Photoshop Web for Generative Expand. So check that one out. Cheers, everyone. Stay tuned for more. We will catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live on this beautiful Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. We have a very exciting day of Lightroom and photography and some amazing new features coming to the program. So I am just thrilled to be joined by the Adobe producer, content producer, also an amazing photographer and just content creator in general, Paco Siller. Paco, welcome to the other side of the camera, my friend.
Yes, thank you. So good to be here. Yeah, usually running stuff behind the scenes, and this time we're going to be doing some guesting. And I have the wonderful James hosting me, which I'm very excited about. Awesome videographer, photographer. Just got back from Italy. I was looking at some of your posts on Instagram. It's yeah, I'm very excited. We're going to be doing some cool stuff here in Lightroom.
Yeah. I am super excited. And for those again that are new to Behance, new to the community, welcome. Please leave all of your questions for Paco, comments, anything you have that you want him to address in the stream today. If you just want to join the chat, leave those comments in Behance. I will be kind of funneling those through to Paco as we go here in this hour. And I'm also going to be taking some comments in the chat on YouTube as well. So with that being said, Paco, I know we have a lot to talk about today. I know I'm stoked because I'm really not sure what you're going to be diving into today, but just to be here and host you is a pleasure. So without further ado, why don't you take it away? And again, throughout the stream, if there's questions, I'll keep sending those your way.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get started because we got a lot of stuff to do. We're going to be focusing on Lightroom today. I'm going to show you kind of what we're shooting for. So let me kind of go to this screen share right here. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys some cool new features in Lightroom, and then I'm gonna show you how to edit these photos and turn them into a carousel post. So kind of something like this. My partner and I went to Italy last year and did some backpacking, and I did a little bit of travel / lifestyle photography. But then I kind of made these carousel posts that came from it, you know, because Instagram, it's kind of portrait, but like, how do you fit a bunch of photos into one post without making it too many posts? You could do a carousel post. So I'll show you all kind of how to do that. It's just a fun way to do a collage of photos and just kind of stick them into this like seamless carousel background post. So I'll show you all how to do that. So we will jump into it in just a second here. And again, we are live. So if you guys have any questions, if you have any comments, any concerns, any suggestions, you know, that's the fun thing about being live is you can kind of influence what direction we're going, or if you want to see a certain edit or anything. So go ahead and call it out. James will be looking at that chat.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah, everyone's excited. Cody, Sam, Sin, what's up, gang?
Hey, what's up? Yeah, I see. Yeah, go ahead.
Those, I was gonna say, like, where was it? Were those the Dolomites, or was that like outside of Switzerland? It looks insane.
Yeah, so that was the Tour de Mont Blanc. So it's, I want to say, like one of the most like beautiful, epic backpacking trips we've done. And you're pretty much hiking a giant circle around the Alps, and it goes through Switzerland, through Italy, and France. So you backpack it, but you kind of end up at these really cool alpine villages where you can have dinner and like sleep in a bed. So it was a lot different than the backpacking trips that we do where we're sleeping in tents and not showering or anything. So it was super cool. And, you know, I got a new camera for it and I was like, I'm just going to shoot like travel style photography. And I loved it. So I'll kind of show you all how to do that, get these cool look with presets, and all that jazz. And I think, James, you're also in Italy too, right? So you've kind of delved in the Dolomites.
Yeah, I've never been there. Like, I've only scratched the surface of Italy in more of the city, and so this was the first time we actually went to the coast. But this area and region of the country is very high on my list, and so
yes,
it looks gorgeous.
It is epic. Okay, so first of all, let's start off with some cool features that were just released with Lightroom, and one of those is the new lens blur effect. So let me show you all kind of how that works. So let's say I have this cool family photo, and by the way, we're in Lightroom. So go ahead and download Lightroom to the latest version, and you can have access to this new feature. So if you kind of scroll all the way down, you are going to see this lens blur little panel. And it's super cool. It can turn anything into kind of a natural bokeh looking photograph. So here we are. Here's the family in Lake Tahoe, right? And let's say, you know, I got a sharp background, but I want to put a little bit more focus on the fam jam. So here's the family, and I kind of want to blur out the background. I shot at a higher f-stop, so I think it was like, I don't know, it could probably tell me here, at f11, so everything's going to be pretty sharp for the most part, right? But let's say we want to, wish I shot like at a f2.8, right? We want to make that background a little blurry. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And then right here, this panel, I think I can actually zoom in here. Yeah, so this panel right here is kind of your focus range. So it'll tell Lightroom where it wants things to be in focus. You can see right there is near, and then to the right is far. So if I kind of slide this to the right, you'll see that the foreground starts to get blurry because now it's focusing on the far side of the photo.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right. It's nuts. Yeah, and you can actually check this little box and it'll visualize the depth. So the stuff that's in orange / yellow will kind of show you what's in focus, and the stuff that's in purple will show you what's not in focus. So with a tool like this, you know, you do kind of want to be subtle about it. You know, when I use tools like this, when I bring AI into photography, I do still kind of want it to look natural. I don't want it to be so extreme that you're like, hey, something's off there. So, you know, I have the blur amount at around 19. I think by default, it'll put it to 50. And, you know, that can work for its own aesthetic purposes, and people might like how that looks. But I know someone who shoots a lot of photography, you can't really get a photo like this where like the people are just in sharp and then everything else is blurry. It's like, oh, this... Right. I know there's some AI stuff going on here. So, you know, I do like to go subtle, but we're still getting the effect. You know, now the focus is more on the family instead of just the super sharp background. And, you know, if you're an outdoorsy guy, maybe you want those mountains in, but let's say we just want the family in there and my mom's like, hey, I really want all you in focus because that you guys are my kids. I love you all. I was like, okay, mom, let's put the fam jam in focus.
You got it, mom. No problem. So question for you. I mean, I'm sure you're going to get into this part of it too, but most of I'd imagine the blur elements and the AI piece of this is better suited when you shoot something that's a little bit more everything being in focus. You know, you shot that at f11. So would you encourage someone to shoot with the idea that, hey, just have everything sharp and then let AI decide what elements, or could it go the other way where if you shot in a more wide open aperture, you could actually like sharpen it?
You could actually do both. I will say that with a shot like this, that it's wide and it kind of has the landscape, the effect is there, but I think this will work more naturally, and I think sell it better if it was more of like a portrait shot, right?
Right.
So, I think this effect really shines when you're shooting portrait or when you're shooting people. And I do have an example. Let's see. So there's already some natural background here, but I'll show you how good it picks it up when we're looking at portrait. And let's say something was shot wide. So right here, here's a buddy. Went backpacking. He brought his really cute dog to some backpacking. And it's already kind of blurry. So I think I shot this where we're shooting at f4.0. So that's already pretty low. But let's say we wanted to make that background even blurrier. So I can go to the lens blur. I can apply. And it's going to do a really good job just kind of masking it out, you see, and it's already applied really, really well. So if I slide this up, he's super in focus. And again, it's just building off something that's already working. So it was already a portrait style photography. It was zoomed in, it was shot on f4, and now I'm enhancing that blurriness. So it's really selling the effect because it's already kind of working with it. I'm not just taking like a super wide f22 shot and then trying to blur something that's kind of small in the foreground.
Right.
So now, I could argue I shot this at like f2.8 and it works pretty damn good. I mean, if we zoom in, right, like it's doing a great job of picking up the hair, separating them from the background. And again, you can just kind of go, that's pretty cool.
That's
you go
pretty
from,
nuts.
from foreground to background.
What's kind of crazy too is, I mean, this has been something that I think in different ways to add blur to inside of Photoshop with like a Gaussian blur or a lens blur. I feel like this is one of the best features we've seen in a long time, especially in Lightroom, because you can be as subtle as possible, but even if you push it, you're not really getting that same, it's almost like a halo-ish effect around somebody's head when you push it too far. Like you really don't see it here.
Right. Exactly. And again, because it's working with something that's already kind of shot this way. And speaking of halo and the types of bokeh, there are different types that you can do. So if you kind of hover over it, it'll tell you what type of bokeh it is. I'm not seeing it here. But anyways, there is different types of blurriness that you can introduce. So, and you can kind of see it changes. And I think like this one's based off a vintage lens. This one's based off an SLR lens. This is just kind of like the normal stuff that you'd probably see in mirrorless cameras. So it's cool. You can just kind of play with it and get different styles of blurriness. And again, this works pretty dang good. Okay, cool. So those are some of the new features in Lightroom that I wanted to shout out. Ooh, actually, I did want to shout out one more. The new Gen Remove feature. So let me go to, let's say this shot. Okay, you're gonna notice a trend here. All my photography is like backpacking in the wilderness because that's where I live in my free time. That's
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Okay, so here's a pretty sweet photo of a bunch of homies. We all went backpacking. These two got engaged, and then we all took a shot to celebrate. We were out in the wilderness in Yosemite. But with all the celebration in mind and just trying to get the shot, I didn't even think about all this stuff in the foreground. We got like these chairs here. We got sandals. We got different layers because it's warm. Then it gets cold out there. So just to kind of not have it so distracting, I want to get rid of these things, right? So let's go over here on the right. You'll see this tool, and then it's the remove tool. But now check it out. This is early access, by the way. We do have this generative AI feature that I can toggle on, and then it gives me a brush. So here's the brush. And what I'm going to end up doing is just kind of brush over the parts that I don't want. So let's say I want to get rid of this chair. Let's just brush over this chair. So I don't, you do want to get a little bit of like brushing outside of the thing. So don't just brush it perfectly. Get a little bit around the edges, like a couple pixels outside to really sell it. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and hit apply, and it's starting to generate. So we'll see the magic that it works. It works pretty dang good. I was testing this the other day.
Yeah, I saw this. I think Terry was showing this at Max in London, and I had heard about it, but I didn't actually see it in action. And it sort of blew my mind too, because we've been waiting for this to happen for a very long time. So this is a huge deal.
I know. In the past, Photoshop has had this for a minute. So I've been taking my shots to Photoshop. You got to convert to DNG, bring it back to Lightroom. But now we have it in Lightroom, which is super exciting. So look at this. You couldn't even tell it was there, right? So that's where it was. Whoops, I don't want to generate a new one. There's the before, there's the after.
That's
Just
crazy.
nuts. Just wouldn't even be able to tell. And there's different variations, right? So let's do another one. Let's get rid of this hat and these clothing layers. So I'll do that. I'll hit apply. Let's see it generate. And then you have, when you generate, you have 4 different variations. So you can kind of play around with different interpretations of how you want it removed. Because sometimes some of them work better than others. I always say when you generate, just look at the 4 different variations and pick which one works best.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where the person who didn't take the photo won't really know the difference. You will as the editor, and that's just like a different sample of a rock that you kind of look at the toes in that one to see how her toes just disappear.
Oh, right. That's a good call. So I think I brushed over her toes. I think if I were to do this again, I'd be careful not to get her toes. So that way we're not messing around with some Gen AI toes. So here, I'll do that again. So let's be careful about not grabbing our friend's toes here. I'm just gonna go
That's a
right here.
good. I
Cool.
feel like that's definitely a good like giveaway with certain things. Like if you brush around fingers or something, and you're like, why does that person's finger look like they have witch hands all of a sudden, or got still? I don't know what kind of hands this generated, but they're working on that.
I was messing around with this last night with my girlfriend. We're removing like people from photos just to see how good it would do, and it did a good job. But then it got rid of a buddy's head in the back, but then his legs were still at the bottom. So if you looked closely, you're like, "There's a body back there, but where's his head?"
Yeah.
So there we go. So now this, I mean, again, you just like never in a million years would you know that like there was something removed. It's just such a good job. And again, there's 3 different variations. Right, like, oh, maybe I like the divot, the more granite, but regardless, all these variations are really gonna end up selling this. So yeah, very cool stuff. So obviously, I would just do it for the rest of them, and then you would get something like this,
Love that, dude.
So you would just never know that stuff was hanging out there. I would have done my job and been like, let's get these things out of the way.
I know. Sometimes, hey, you know what? That's when you're in that moment, when you're on the high of, backpacking and your friends get married. And
That's exactly what happened.
That's not what you're thinking about. You're just thinking about like, let's just get one photo of all of us before we forget and have too good of a time. So
yeah, you nailed it. It was like, we're all happy. Like everybody's just high from being there, like just being in the backpacking world. And then afterwards I'm like, oh, there's so much stuff in the foreground. But with Lightroom Gen AI, you could just get that stuff out of there. So it's fun stuff. Okay, cool.
Quick
go
question
ahead.
from the chat just before you hop into the next one. Well, one, Keys thinks that you're in fact a feral trail dog. I have to agree. I feel like Paco lives on the
feral trail
dog. And Sean wanted to know what the story with Gen credits are going to be within Lightroom Classic and just Lightroom.
Yeah, so anytime you do anything with Gen AI or use Firefly, that's what we call the generative things that we do on these apps. You do use generative credits. You're not going to run out of these in a month. So if you go to your account, let's say you're on Firefly, like you go to the Firefly website. Maybe I can show that real quick. Let's see. Firefly, Adobe. Yeah, so if you kind of click on your account and you're logged in, it'll tell you how many credits you have. You have a ton. And they repopulate every month. So chances are you're really not going to get rid of these credits at all. So I think right here, it's going to tell me, yeah, so I have 1,000 credits per month. And again, at the end of the month, you'll get 1,000 more. So there's just a ton to work with. But anytime you do use generative in Photoshop or Lightroom, it's going to take one of these credits. But yeah, there's a ton. I mean, I've been using generative AI quite a bit, and then I'd never even get close to getting rid of that a month. And again, it just re-ups every month. So
yeah, that's an amazing, very good question too, because I was kind of curious about that. I wasn't sure where they were landing on how many credits you're going to get a month, but that's, I mean, yeah, unless you're mistakenly putting things in all of your photos you have to remove. Ideally we want to try to avoid that when we're shooting our photos. This is purely for fixing those mistakes that
yes,
are unavoidable.
I agree. The way I like to see it, this has been a joke a lot in the video industry or just anywhere where there's post-production involved. You're like, well, fix it in post. And yes, you can fix it to some extent, But honestly, your job and the editor's job or the producer's job is just so much easier if you get it right in camera. So that is always the goal. You know, personally, every time I shoot anything, video or photo, I always try and get as much work done on the shoot so there's less work to do in post-production. But then we have those tools that do make our lives easier in case we do need to do stuff. You know, before they used to be a little bit more manual, clone stamp tool in Photoshop, but now you can do it in a click of a button. So, you know, we are, I'd say, very what's the word I'm looking for? Luxurious. We're very lucky to have these tools in our age. But again, you know, use them when you need them. Don't just rely on them. That's my take on it.
That's a very good note.
Okay, cool. So let's get into editing some photos. So what I want to do is I want to edit a couple photos in Lightroom. I want to demonstrate presets. So I used to just edit all my landscape photos manually, but then started discovering presets, and I think they're great. Especially, I like using them with travel and lifestyle shoots. So I'll show you how that works. Kind of have like this cool unison look for a certain trip, and then we'll make an image carousel post out of it. And if there's any time, I'll show you a cool trip making hyperlapses and stuff. Okay, so let's have a look at this photo. Oops. So this photo, actually, I want to edit normally because I want to show you something, and then another one I'll show a preset. But this photo, there was just a rainbow right here, right? It was a super cool shot. It was in the middle of that TMB. I think we were in Italy by then. But then I took the shot, and this is a raw photograph. So obviously, we got to do some edits, bring that color back, bring it back to life. So let me show you the power of masking, kind of doing like radio filters, and then bringing this photo to life. So first of all, I like to mess with the curves. So going to give it some contrast. So going to bring down the darks and shadows up here and bring up the highlights and the whites just a little bit, but not too much because it's already a bright photo. And then I'll bring down the highlights, right? Start to get some details back in those shadows, or sorry, in that sky. And then I'll bring up the shadows a little bit. Okay. And then I might even actually bring down the exposure just a hair because this is a bright photo. Okay, and boom, what was that, like 30, 40 seconds? We can already see a difference. So there's kind of the before, there's the after. And it's already given a lot of contrast. And a lot of the heavy lifting is these curves. Like I really enjoy working with these curves because it just gives that contrast, that targeted contrast in the areas that you want. Okay?
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned it too, like the subtlety of using those curves. I think if you're just using Lightroom for the very first time, like be more subtle with it than aggressive, because curves, you're taking that contrast for the entire image, so it doesn't need a lot. I mean, you didn't really do too much. You have two points on that curve, and it's already darkened and added some contrast. So
yeah, and then you could see like here's the darks. It was mainly just more contrast, kind of like in the darker part of the picture to really bring that detail in. Okay, but all right. And when I look at a photograph, I kind of like to accentuate where the lighting is. So right here, I'd say the focal point is kind of this cool sunspot, obviously this rainbow, and it's a little bit naturally lighter here than it is in the dark. So, when I edit photos, I like to think of just kind of painting an image with light. It's like, where do I want the eye to go? So this is where masking really comes into play. So I really like to use the linear gradients and the radial gradients. So let's start off with a linear gradient. Although this area is really beautiful, I obviously don't want the eye to focus kind of in this area. So I will go ahead and kind of start a linear gradient here. And I'll go ahead and just turn it a little bit to kind of get that angle of the photo. And what's red is where the mask is going to apply. I can toggle it on or off by just hitting the O key. So I like to see where it is going to be, and then I'll hit O to get rid of it. Go away. Okay, maybe I have to make an adjustment. Here we go. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to turn down the exposure just kind of there. Because again, I want the action to be around here. All right, so there's one mask. I'll go ahead and do a radial gradient and kind of add it in this section where it looks like the pot of gold is going to be from this rainbow. That's where I want the action to be.
It really does.
And then I'll go ahead and just kind of bring up the shadows here, and then bring up the exposure a tiny bit. And again, it's all these changes, they seem subtle, but you'll see once you add all these little subtle changes, it ends up making the bigger picture. Right, and then I do like to warm it up just a little bit, just because light is generally warm. So again, kind of bring in more attention there, right? And then obviously the rainbow. So for this, I'm going to use a brush, and then I'm just kind of going to go over where the brush is, or sorry, where the rainbow is. So brushing where that is. And then I'm going to bring up its saturation because I want that color to really come out. And then let's bring it a little bit, bring it a little bit of exposure. Okay. Then I'll do one more brush, and then I just kind of want to start highlighting these areas of light. So this is kind of like, now we're getting into dodging and burning. We're just kind of showing, you know, the bright parts, we're accent or bringing them up and then bringing in the shadows. So,
I love that little spot there too. It's like, it's crazy because when you first look at that raw image, I think a lot of the times, I'm sure you deal with this too. You don't think you got a shot. Like you bring it back, you're like, oh, that was way too overexposed. And the power of a raw photo is
oh
incredible. I
yeah.
mean, you have blue highlights in the sky that were not there, or they didn't look like they were there in the raw. And then you have this beautiful light on that little, you know, side of the mountain there that you can actually create that focal point. And I mean, it is all possible because you're shooting raw and you have that ability
I
to.
agree. Yeah, I mean that's a very good point. I would argue, you know, at the very start, I would argue that this picture was a little bit overexposed, you know, but with the power of raw, I mean, look at it. Like, look at this different.
Yeah.
Look
Yeah.
at this difference. It's super bright. Now we're doing local adjustments. We're bringing light to this area. We're kind of getting rid of, or we're bringing the attention more here by bringing in a linear gradient. Um, and then, yeah, I'm going to do one more thing. So a really cool trick I like to do to really kind of focus on the focal point of a photo is I like to make another radial gradient. And again, this is all resizable. So this whole area is just kind of like the cool hot spot of this
Yeah.
picture.
Right.
So what I like to do is I like to bring up the exposure just a tiny bit in this area, but then I like to duplicate and invert this mask. Okay. So here it is. And I'm actually going to make it bigger because again, everything that's red is what's going to make, or is where the changes are going to apply. And this is just a little too much. This mask is doing a little too much. So I'm going to actually invert it. So I brought light to this small circle and then everything around it, I'm actually going to decrease the exposure a little bit. Right. And there we go. So now we're really bringing attention kind of to that area. And then look at what masks have done. So, you know, this is without masks. This is with masks. Again, it's these local adjustments that are really just kind of bringing this photo to life and telling the viewer where to look. Right?
Yeah, it's
amazing. Maybe I'll just do. Sorry,
those radial gradients, I use those often as well, and they really, I feel like they just look so much more subtle than you know, like the vignette tool, because obviously you have the vignette tool inside of your adjustments, but it can look a little bit too obvious, whereas the inverting those radial masks helps you to sort of control it a little bit more. And I love what you did there with, you know, doing both, creating that highlight in the middle and then sort of darkening that outside.
I agree 100%. Again, this goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier is, you know, I do like to make my photos look natural. I don't like to overdo them. My goal when I edit is like, how do I remember it looking in person? And obviously we are kind of playing around with the light to bring in more attention to the focal point, which to me is this rainbow coming down to that light spot there. But I think the radial gradients, the linear gradients do a phenomenal job in kind of making subtleties. And again, there's so many subtle little things that really paint that picture, but it's subtle enough where it's not too much, right? It's not like, whoa, that is clearly brighter than the other. It just kind of works in this natural way, in my opinion, right? Art is subjective, you know, you can think differently, but that's just kind of how I go about it. Cool. So yeah, let's look at the before and the after. And yeah, I mean, that came out pretty dang cool.
Yeah, man, it looks awesome. What a huge difference. And again, subtle. I think the thing that you also have to remember too, like you've been a photographer for a long time and you've been doing this for a long time. So to start, you almost, if you're just using Lightroom for the very first time, you almost have to push things so that you can see what you don't like or the style that you resonate with. And so you have to be skilled in doing it over time to know what subtle means.
James out here preaching. I mean, that is, I agree so much on that too. That's how essentially how I learned the app. Right. I forgot. I was watching, I think when like LinkedIn Learning was a big thing in like 2014, 15.
Yeah.
When I was learning photography, I remember, oh man, I wish I could give him credit for this. But a guy was like, the way that I learned Lightroom is I push something to the extreme and I dial it back. So I know what doesn't look good because it's too much, but then I slide these sliders back enough to be like, but that looks good. You know, for example, like let's say the temperature here. Like if I want to go warm and I'm like, that's way too warm. It's like, okay, let me start dialing it back and see what looks natural. Now we're starting to get to this area where like, okay, that looks natural right there. You know, same thing with the tint. It's like, yeah, obviously that's not going to be a real scenario, but you know, sometimes you do need to mess with the tint. So bring it to the extreme and then start dialing it back.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to push things thinking you're going to mess something up. You know, like these are all adjustments added to that raw file. So you always have that.
It's
you
non-destructive.
always have
So
that, non-destructive way to edit. So just I think it's interesting to see different people's editing style. Like my wife Anna, her editing style in Photoshop and Lightroom is significantly different than the way I do things. Like she'll paint more on things to add those extreme elements, whereas I want to see it as I'm going. It's just my own personal thing. So it's a style. Everyone has one. So Paco, I think this is a great way to kind of kick things off and show us your style, which is awesome.
Thank you. Okay, cool. So that's kind of how I do landscape. Now let's talk about, like, let's say I want to do that carousel post, but I want all the images to kind of look a certain way. So let's get into presets. All right, so here we are on this photo. So this is the raw image. What I like to do with presets is I like to kind of slap one on and then work with it. So I think, sometimes people put on a preset and they think a photo looks good. If that's your jam, right on. Again, art is subjective. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Personally, I do like to do it as kind of a starting point to give me a look, sort of say. And then I like to add my own unique style and edits to it to just kind of make it, more me instead of just slapping on a preset. So if I go up here to the top right, now we're looking at presets, okay? And if you have the Lightroom Creative Cloud membership, you get a ton of premium presets. These aren't even all of them, right? So if I go to manage presets, you can see, I mean, there are tons, right? Like I just kind of filtering right now by the ones that I tend to use the most, but there's so many. There's concerts, food, creative, auto, portraits. I mean, there's tons. I've messed around a lot with the default presets. Again, if you have Lightroom, everybody has this presets. You can buy presets from other people. Again, there's tons of presets out there. There's even community presets, which we'll get into. But the ones in default by Lightroom, I think you can do plenty of with. And the ones that I tend to stick with a lot are actually this futuristic style. I really end up liking what these presets do. And I found myself kind of navigating a lot to this futuristic one for landscape, along with the lifestyle ones. So what's cool is if you just kind of hover over these presets, it's already kind of giving you a preview of what's going to be. And again, I don't like to use these presets at 100%. I will kind of tone them down or kind of make my own adjustments. But for this one, let's go to futuristic. And the one I really like is FT02, so futuristic 02. Right? And then from here, again, once you select it, you can kind of tone it down. So you can go from 100 down, and it's kind of like if you do video, it's like a LUT, right? Like when you use a creative LUT, if you do it at 100%, it's kind of a lot. You just kind of want to bring it down a little bit. So let's say I want it at the 75%, okay? Cool, so there is my preset. And then from there, I just like to mess with the global edits. So over here on the curves, what you can see it did is when you have the bottom left of the curve, those are the darks. And a cool trick to do is to kind of lift that up and you start to get this fade look. That kind of gives it like this film look that I don't know. Did you ever use Visco presets, James?
Sure.
Those were like a thing. Everybody used them.
Like,
I definitely chased that. Like 2015, 14, 16. Like that was the thing.
It's kind of crazy that whole, like the early days of Visco has now almost like reared its head again, and everybody wants to have old school looks, film looks, whether it's shooting digital but making it feel like film. So I think everybody's probably pretty interested in that style.
It is. And now, Fuji, I know the Fuji cameras kind of have that natural style in, which is why, I know a lot of people that shoot Fuji because it kind of emulates that style.
Yeah, I've been shooting on one for the better part of a year, and I hate to say it, it's unfortunately gotten me out of using Lightroom a lot more because I am just taking the JPEGs right from the camera and they look great.
Because it's
there's definitely a time and place where I'm like, I need to get back into Lightroom and be shooting on my camera.
Yeah, the Fuji's making it easy. That is a look that a lot of people chase, so they definitely capitalized on that. Okay, so again, love messing with some curves. Let's see, without this curve, there's just, I think let's think about what the focal point of this photo is. I would argue it's this peak with this light just kind of shining on it. Contrast in lightscape is what makes a great image. That's why shooting at sunset, sunrise, you start to get really dynamic shadows and light. And I love playing with that stuff and accentuating in Lightroom. So we have a ton of shadow stuff here, which, is good, but it really exemplifies this light spot. So I do kind of want to turn down the darks a little bit, right? And then maybe I'll bring up the brights just a little bit, okay? And it's already looking a little too bright, but we can go over here to our global sliders and then start to bring down the highlights. And look at that, we start to get all that detail back in those brights, right? There is a, I don't know if you know ETTR, exposed to the right. It's like a method of shooting.
Oh,
So,
no, I've never heard of that.
yeah, so it's with raw photography, and you actually do this sometimes too in video when you're like shooting C-Log or S-Log. You want to ETTR, you want to expose to the right. And the plan is to overexpose your shots by stop or stop and a half, so that in post, you can bring them down and then really have that detail shine. And again, it only works in raw photographs, because if you look at raw, you're like, this looks blown out. But the
Right.
process of exposing to the right and getting as much as you can in the brights without clipping and then dialing it back in post just gives you like super sharp, super detailed lights. And that's kind of what's happening here. Is, this is how it looked beforehand. And, by default, this looks kind of bright, but when I start to dial it back, then I really get some really good light in those shadows, and it just looks pretty dang sharp.
Well, I think what's cool too about looking at an image like this, Paco, and a lot of your images in here, is however you choose to edit it. Like when you look at a photo and the style could be so many different things because the photograph is well composed and you shot it with those things in mind. You shot it raw, you shot it without overblowing the highlights and without underexposing those darks. The camera you're using is able to handle that, and you can actually pull that up. And so you can really, like, all these presets work because the photo is well exposed in the first place. And so it's just completely up to your style. I think one other thing before I forget, because you had mentioned something about, you approach a photograph and look at the shadows, you look at the light. And I think it's important, whether presets are convenient or not for your work, that you have a story going into each photograph, and okay, well, what do I want to get out of this photo? What do I want the emotions to be? How do I want to remember it? And then you implement the steps in your edit to make that happen.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. I'm definitely shooting kind of with a style in mind, and just kind of how, I've been doing this for many years. I just know what works for me, and ETTR, exposing to the right, for landscape at least for me, has always worked out, because I'm able to again, really play with the dynamic contrast that comes in a light. Okay, cool. So let's do that. And again, this photo, honestly, like sometimes you do 2 or 3 adjustments, and you don't have to go super in deep with mask adjustments and all that jazz. Sometimes the photo just looks great out of the camera, and all you got to do is just turn down the highlights, bring up the shadows, and call it done. There's not a hard and fast rule where like you have to dodge and burn everything to make it look. To me, I think we're like 90% there, right? So what I might do is just kind of maybe do a linear gradient just to kind of hide. Again, bring more attention to that bright peak a little more. So I'll turn this, and again, I'm gonna be real subtle here, just because I already like what's going on here. And then I'll do a radial gradient and just kind of, we'll make it more of an oval to kind of go with this whole area, just really exemplify the light that's going on there. So maybe right there, and then maybe I'll just bring the exposure up just a tiny bit, and then again, I'm gonna warm it up just a little bit. Right, and then maybe give it some tint right there.
The peak is so epic. It's just
I know, I love it.
That's amazing.
Before and after, and then I might even just crop this a little bit just to really focus on that peak. So maybe kind of bring it up, rule of thirds, get those intersecting lines to where I want to be, something like that. Okay, cool. So then, boom, that photo is already done. I like that. So let's look at one more edit. So what do we bring in the chat on this one? What would we like to edit? So let's call this option A, the house with some mountains. Okay. Let's call this option B. This I took from one of the hotels that we stayed in, just overlooking a valley. It's kind of like a hostel. It's like a hostel with the most epic view. It's amazing.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would stay at the hostel. That's insane.
I know, it looks like we splurged here, but it was just a hostel. Europe is amazing with hostels, and it's just this whole area. You can't go wrong with where you stay. So that'll be option B, and then we could do this one, which I would say this is kind of like the hero shot. So this is option C. Okay, right, so we'll let the chat. So let me know A, B, or C. So again, this is A, is this house with some mountains. B, hostel view. Oops. Or we do C right here. Okay. And then while I wait,
I think I know the one that I would like to see. So I have an option.
Okay. All right. Well, what do you? Unless what option do you want? And then if the chat agrees, we'll stick with it.
We got one in the chat. Yeah. 2 in the chat, and the option that I would like. Yeah, I think you have to go with option C.
Okay.
So we got.
I think we have to go with C.
We got 3 for C and 4, including myself. I mean, they're all
Okay.
really epic, but that hero shot looks pretty sweet.
That is it. So this was kind of like the shot that exemplified this trip. I use this shot a lot in my Instagram. You know, this is the photo I shared with family. So yes, I think this one came out great.
You know what I
So
like about that shot a lot? Minus like, it's hard to really tell the style of backpack, but I don't know, Paco, if you feel the same way in terms of your style, but years ago at Adobe Max, Chris Burkard was speaking about his style of wanting every photograph he takes to feel timeless, that you could put yourself in that place no
that's
matter
great.
when you were there. And I think it's hard to do because you're taking photos of people wearing different clothing or driving a car that's dated or things that date a place. Other than that backpack, I would say that this is pretty close to as timeless as you can get.
I agree 100%. I mean, you don't really see cars or a lot of, you know, I mean, these mounts have been here for centuries. So
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah. I mean, it's a big bulky backpack. I don't know. They were pretty bulky back then. Who knows?
They were, yeah, they were just like boards back then, I think.
They were, it's like with the silver frame and boards. It's crazy how far
Yeah,
we come with
yeah.
like backpacking technology. Okay. So let's get back to this. Let's look at the presets. So again, I like to look at the presets and the futuristic. So there's FT02. 03, 04. I like 04. I like what's happening here. Obviously, I'm going to tone this down a little bit, but it's kind of giving it, you know, speaking on the timeless, like I feel like it's giving it this like timeless fade. It's almost looking like this
Totally.
Fuji look that I'm digging. Right. And then FT06, 08. You know, 08's not bad either.
Even that one's
Right, but
pretty
this is
cool
what I
too.
like to do. I like to hover over the presets and kind of see where my starting point's going to be. FT11, I'm digging that too. Let's go to the lifestyle ones real quick. The LFO1 can also work for me. That it's doing too much with the colors, these presets.
Yeah.
So again, I do want a good starting point, something kind of that's going to look good, but again, I am going to adjust it. So I'll go back to, I think FT08 is what I was feeling. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and tone this preset down a little bit. Okay, and then we'll go to the editing panel. Let's see right here.
It almost looks like this could be a painting. Like it, depending on the preset you put on there, it creates almost different looks of, you know it's a photograph, but it could very well be some sort of framed painting.
Yeah, I do this. I think you saw one of them. Is I do like to turn my photography into like posters, like travel posters, kind of the ones that you see. And maybe I'll come back and show this, but you can take it into Photoshop and do the neural filters and kind of turn this into a painting. Like it's super, super cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. You can see now it's doing a lot with the curves. All right. Again, I kind of want to just, I don't want to bring the contrast down too much, just because there's already a lot going on. But maybe I will bring the brights up a little bit. Kind of give it more of that fade look. And then it is looking a little cool for me, this photo, so I do want to warm it up just a little bit. Right, maybe bring this tint down. Whoops. Yeah, and then we'll just kind of mess with some gradient filters. So there's a lot going on here. So I do kind of want to, again, redirect where the action is. And I do think it's my partner here, Jamie, with this epic mountain backdrop. So
Paco, could you actually show us, if rather than using the radial gradient, can you show us if you just wanted to select her and bring up the highlights
like select
of just the
subject?
subject? Yeah.
Yeah, so I believe it's, let's see, no, it's not going to be objects. Let's do select subject. Boom, look at that.
Yeah, that's insane.
So that was crazy. I just did select subject and then it'd bring her up. And that is actually a great call out, James, because I think this original photo, I did bring her up. So I would bring up the shadows, right? So again, we can kind of see, let me turn this off. Kind of see before, or here, let me zoom in. So this is with select subject, and then this is with it off. And again, it's subtle, but it is kind of bringing more attention to her because I would argue she's already a little bit dark in this photo. But by bringing up the shadows, then we're really starting to show the subject here. And again, we're gonna play off that just a little more by kind of bringing in the attention to the shot. So I'll do something like this. I'll bring up the exposure just a little bit. And then this is, again, my favorite trick. We'll duplicate and invert, right? And I don't want it to affect so much of the photo, so I am going to just widen what it's affecting. But then from here, I'll bring it down, right? And then even with these adjustments, and we're really starting to get the focus right here. And I think what I ended up doing with this photo is I actually ended up cropping it. So I think I went, let's see, so if you unlock it and then kind of go towards portrait, right? And then lock this, then I could do like a true like 4:3, right? And then I'll go ahead and hit enter. And there we go. Yeah. Like that. I think that would be a great shot for like Instagram or something like that. I love that. That's sweet. Yeah. So yeah, again, great shots. Okay. So we have, wow, time flies. We got 15 minutes left. So let me show you how I would make a carousel post out of this in Express. So here we are in Express. Okay. So we have to make a canvas that's really big. And I did this math for you, so you don't have to. But the canvas that I like to start off is 4316 by 1350. So I'll go ahead and create a new file. Okay. And then I have to upload some media. So what I ended up doing for time's sake is just kind of already making the edits. So if we go to Lightroom, here's kind of the exports that I picked, right? Here's this one, all of these already here. This one was a really cool spot.
Oh, that's
Maybe I can
sweet.
show you guys. I know that campsite was nuts.
So you camped right there?
This is where we camped. Yeah.
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah. This is what they call wild camping in Europe. And, we stayed in hotels/hostels for most of them, but 2 nights we did wild camp, and this one I think was like one of my favorite camp spots that we stayed. And then this was like the view from inside the tent.
Oh my goodness.
Right? Okay, so let's say I want to put all these photos in like one post on Instagram, right? Here's our exports. So I'll go back to here, and then what I first start off with and think about is like, let me get this background image first. So I can upload from device. We'll go to the exports, and I think, let's see, we'll say that this one is the background image. Okay, so I'll go ahead and open this. Then I'm going to extend it. Nope, I don't want to crop it. I want to extend it. So I'll extend this to the full length of this canvas. And then I'm going to hit this button. Let's see. Where's my layers? There's usually a button that says set as background, and I can't find it. Maybe because I haven't confirmed. Yeah. Anyways, we'll lock this, and then we'll make it the background.
Okay.
Okay. So actually, hold on.
All right. As Paco's doing this, I just want to let everyone know we got about 13 minutes left here. So any other questions we have as Paco's continuing to build his grid, leave that in the chat over on Behance or YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, so here is, I do want to blur it because, again, this isn't going to be the focal point of the canvas. So I do want to kind of darken it and then blur it just so we can focus more on the actual stuff that I'm going to have up there. It'll be something like that, right? And then I'm going to lock it so that I'm not messing with it. Okay, so then I'll go ahead and then add another photo. So I do like to start with a portrait photo. This will all make sense when I kind of bring it to my phone. So let's say this one was kind of like a cool hero image. So here it is. Go ahead and make it bigger. Now I do like to add a border to these shots. So here's a cool little hack on how to add a border in Express. So we'll go to Elements, or maybe it's under, let's see. I am looking.
Is it under, is it backgrounds? So design assets backgrounds?
It's, no, I'm just looking for like the rectangles. I think it's under shapes here.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Cool. So I'll take this right here, and then I'm going to make it the exact size of this photo. Okay. And then I'm going to stick this behind, and now I can have a equal border by just adding this right here. So now I know that the border is equal on the width and the height of it. Right? And then I can change, I do want a white. Okay. Cool. So that way they kind of separate more from the background. It looks a little bit more polished. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and group these two. So Command G. Right. And then here is kind of my first post. And again, the idea behind this is we're going to cut it up into 4 pieces, and then it's going to be a swipeable post. So I do like to have a portrait shot at the beginning and then another one at the end. So cool thing about Express is we can duplicate. So Command D, we'll duplicate it. Oops, hold on a sec. I think I have to get out of this grid view. Here we go. So we'll duplicate this and we'll bring this over here. And now I can just replace the image. So if I go inside this photo, and I think shortcuts are key. We hit Control R. It's going to take me to the replace image, and then I'll pick another portrait shot. And let's do this one inside the sleeping tent. And there we go. And as you can see, it kept those changes I made with the border. So again, working smarter, not harder here.
Absolutely. Yeah, that looks sweet already.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think in this gap, I want just like two 16:9 photos. So what's cool about doing this type of carousel post is that you can mix and match different aspect ratios. So with Instagram, like let's say you want to do a portrait, then you got to stick with portrait. Unless you do something like this, then you can put like a 16:9 shot inside a 9:16. Right. So let me go ahead and bring in one more photo, 16:9. See, we'll get that awesome shot that we edited that I really like. There we go.
So technical question for you, just from exporting. I know you had pre-exported these photos. So for Instagram, just for those that are unfamiliar, what is the ideal aspect ratio that you want to export these photos at? And like, so 4:5 and 16:9, or is it just whatever the photo was shot at and cropped at, you're exporting?
Yeah, it depends if you want to go portrait or landscape. I always forget like what, Instagram likes. Like if you go to Instagram aspect ratios, there's like
a ton
handy grids. So I always end up doing something like this. Like this will tell you. Cool. It's like, oh, do you want to, and then you just crop in Lightroom. Like, do you want it to be a pose? Do 4:5. Do you want it to be a reel? Then you do like, 9:16. So,
and so to get that number that you put into Express that you created that canvas with, you basically just duplicated those numbers over what, like 3?
Yes. Okay, I see what you mean. Great question. I know I've already messed with this before, and I know that this is all going to come out at 4:5. So this is going to be a post, and I think with a post, the most you can do is a 4:5 ratio. So the dimensions that I did is 4:5, but like multiplied, so I can have nice and big
cool.
canvas to work with.
Cool.
Okay. Okay, cool. So let's go back to elements, and then I'm going to give this 16:9 its own border. So same thing. Come on. There we go. Zoom in here. So I will just make it the size of the canvas. Or sorry, the size of the photo. Right here, right here. Good old layers panel. Put this behind, and then I'm going to give it a border. I do like to stay even, so I forgot what the number I did for the border for here. So let's see, if I go here, that border thickness was 25. Yeah, so I'll go here, and then I'll make this 25. Cool. Now we're staying nice and even, so everything is consistent. Okay, and then same thing, I'll group these. All right, and then we'll just resize it, maybe something like this. And then I want one more shot, so I'll duplicate it. Oops, I did the same thing again. I gotta get out of the like group function. So we'll duplicate it. Nope. Right here. Duplicate. There it is. Okay, and then I will replace that photo with. Let's go with this. Cool. You can't go wrong with mountains and trees, man. With that mountain,
right?
With that alpenglow right there.
It's insane.
Some red alpenglow.
What time was that at in the morning?
That was sunset. Yeah. So this was actually, I was on the street here, and I saw, like, we were at a campsite, and I looked across, and I saw that these mountains were starting to turn. So I grabbed my camera, literally ran in the middle of the street. I mean, it's Europe. There's tiny little streets, so it was fine. But then I had a zoom lens, so I like zoomed in all the way. I think it was like the 24-105. And then I just zoomed in, and it's all full frame, so I cropped in more to zoom in. It looked pretty dang cool.
It looks awesome.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, we'll do something like this. Okay. And now I have essentially taken kind of the whole length of this canvas frame, and then all I'm going to do from here is I'll do download, PNG. Let's do PNG. We like nice long quality. Okay, and then I'm going to plug in my phone, and then I'm going to show you this cool hack. Let's see, where There's my iPhone cord. Here it is. I'm gonna show you this cool hack on how I like split this up for the Insta.
Yeah, this is something that I always forget how to do. And then I'm like searching the internet to figure out the right aspect ratio. So instead, I can just watch the stream again.
There you go. Yeah, and there is math involved. You know, I didn't go through the math just for time's sake, but I did crop at a 4:5 ratio, and then that's kind of like what the end result's going to be. So I know when I split it, it's at 4:5.
Sweet.
So okay, let me just kind of airdrop this to my phone real quick.
Yeah, do your
Here
thing.
it is.
Robert, thanks for joining us. Yes, I agree. Beautiful shots, Paco. It's nice to see the chat blowing up a little bit. It's always fun to have you on here, Paco, because if people think that you're just the creative producer for Adobe Live, they are sadly mistaken, because your photos are incredible and your
Appreciate that.
approach to photography is refreshing. And oh, like you already got the background going on.
Yeah, so check it out. I forgot that photo we edited is actually what's on my background. I've had that for
Nice.
a couple years now. Okay, so I'll show you the photo. There's the photo that we just exported. Oh, you're not gonna be able to see it because it's not portrait, but all good. So this is what I do. I'll go to, let's see, it's under photo apps and then shortcut. So the Apple shortcuts are super useful in things like this. I looked up this shortcut. It's called Instagram Swipe Panorama. So if I click on it, there is my full photo and it's super long. And again, it says, how many slide counts do you want? Do you want 2, 3, or 4? I know if I do 4, it separates them evenly into 4 swipeable photos. I tested all this before. I just know those dimensions are going to work with 4. If I did 2 or 3, then it's going to be cropped in because it's got to take in count for that aspect ratio we're talking about. So I'll do 4. It's going to do its thing. Boom. So now if I go to photos, right, there's the super long one.
Sweet.
And then there's the first one. There's the second one. There's the third one. And then there's the fourth one. Okay. And then I'll show you how it all looks on Instagram. So let's say I was going to Instagram and I wanted to do a post. I'll hit that multiple photo and then I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then I'll go to next, and then you can preview it. So here you can see it's kind of this like seamless carousel post.
Dude, that looks
Right?
awesome.
Yeah. And then, you know, it's a little off center there. I would go back, you know, I do like to have this like test account where I go and, you know, I just eyeball it. I'm like, if it looks good on eye, it's good. And then I would probably on my canvas just go back and then slide this over a few pixels to the right just to have it a little bit more centered. But as you can see, it just kind of turns into like this seamless swipeable pose. It's, you know, a little bit more engaging than if you were just to do like a single photo. So yeah,
I love that. I love that, man. Yeah, when it's so cool about that too is, I mean, the photos that you showed today, they all tell a story, and I think what's refreshing about the way that you're putting this out there is it's telling a story itself through this seamless carousel, and I'm a big fan of that kind of forever carousel, whether it's one photo or a long one. But this is an interesting way to do it. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, so that is how you do it. Now you know how to make some cool swipeable photos with Express and using your smartphone. Okay, so I know we got about 3 minutes. I do want to show one more cool feature. We're not going to be able to get into the time lapse, unfortunately, but for another day, all good. Okay, so I want to show this photo. This is another backpacking trip with a bunch of friends, and I did an HDR shot. So back when I used to have my old camera, the Canon 5D3, it's a tank, it's a beast. It did its service with me proud. I love it to death, but the dynamic range isn't as great as the Canon R6 that I'm shooting with now. So before, to get like all these photos in one exposure, I would have to blend it, and then I get a DNG, and then I have all the exposures. But you know, sometimes you get the thing where if you do 3 exposures, people are blurry, yada, yada, yada. So it's kind of a long process to get one nice exposure of like all the different dynamic range. But there's this cool feature now in Lightroom that has AI denoising. So it does have to be a raw file. So CR2 is Canon's like proprietary raw format. So it does have to be a raw file, but let me show you what's cool about using this tool. So instead of me blending it, I'm just going to work with one exposure instead of blending 3 together. So let me show you how I do that. Again, I'm going to bring the shadows up because the people are the subject. We'll bring the highlights down just to kind of get that sky nice and colorful. Again, we'll mess a little bit with some contrast here. Again, what James said, you want to be super subtle about this. You don't want to do too much. Okay, and then let me show you a cool feature. We do have a select sky option. So right here, it selected the sky. in one click of a button. And then I'm just going to bring the exposure down a little bit. And then I do like to turn up the saturation just to really sell that cotton candy sky that was going on there. Okay. And then
is this in
yeah, sorry,
Oregon somewhere?
This is the Lost Coast in California.
Oh,
It's
nice.
like you're backpacking. It does look like Oregon. You're actually on the border of Oregon, but
That's
you're
beautiful.
backpacking like the coast of California. It's like insanely
Sick.
rugged. They could never develop any like commercialization buildings there, which is why they call it the Lost Coast.
Sick.
And it's really cool. So what I did there is I duplicated and invert the mask. I knew that the other mask was the sky. So if I inverted, I know that the foreground is now kind of the mask there. So I'm going to bring everybody up. Okay. And then actually I do think it's a little too contrasty for me. So we'll do something like that. Okay,
Love
cool.
it, dude.
Now if we zoom in, you know, we can kind of tell that there's a bit of noise going on, right? Like especially in the blacks, right? And in me too, right? Because this was kind of a middle shot where I kept the exposure for the sky, but then also wanted enough light for the subject, which was all the friends. But
Paco,
what I can do now.
I think we're running out of time here. We got
Oh,
30
we are.
seconds.
Okay. Well, we got about
Unfortunate.
5 minutes. So this is one long event. So we'll take it to like the 26th to the 27th. I just
All
want
right.
to show this super quick. But thank you for keeping me on time. I know
Yeah,
I'm
man.
like the one that's usually yelling in people's ears.
No, it's all good, dude.
So, okay. So I'm just going to show you the denoise feature real quick. Cool. So it made a new photo now. It made a DNG, but this time with the denoise applied. Okay. Now look at that.
Wow.
So now you can see those blacks.
Oh,
You know, the darks and the people. It's no longer grainy.
yeah.
So
It looks
I'll show you.
awesome.
Like this is before. It's kind of grainy. You have these darks, and then here's the after. So you know, grainy, a little bit of noise, and this gets rid of the noise. And now I have like a great exposure all around. So before, after with denoise. Cool stuff.
I love that. I love that, man. Well, I love that photo. Again, thanks for coming on here, man, and teaching us your
it's fun.
ways, your expertise. It's always a pleasure to host you. And again, thank you to everyone that joined the chat on YouTube, on Behance. Make sure to stick around right after this stream. We got a lot of more Lightroom features and photography today. And Paco, thanks again for just being the man you are and being an incredible photographer. So for those
Appreciate
that
it.
want to join the community, make sure to subscribe to the Adobe Live YouTube channel and head over to Behance for more content like this one.
Yes,
All
go
right.
ahead and subscribe, and we'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, stick
Yeah.
around. We got Tiffany coming up next with Ben Ward. See you later.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Benjamin Ward. I'm a product manager on the Lightroom team. I'm super excited to introduce my special guest today, Tiffany Nguyen. Tiffany is a fantastic photographer and is also a 2024 Lightroom Ambassador. She is here today to tell us all about her photography, and she is also going to show us the newest awesome features which are available in the latest version of Lightroom, which just came out today. If you have any questions during Tiffany's session, put them in the chat. I'll answer them there if I can. Otherwise, I will pass them on to Tiffany. And now I will turn it over to Tiffany. Tiffany, take it away.
Hey everyone, I'm Tiffany Nguyen. Some of you might also know me as Tiff Penguin on social media. Like Ben mentioned, I'm one of this year's Adobe Lightroom ambassadors. So I've been testing out the new features for the past month, and I'm really excited to share all the different features with you guys, and especially two of my favorite ones, which we're going to go over, Generative Remove and also Lens Blur. So yeah, really excited to jump into that. But first, for those of you that don't know my work, I want to share just like some examples of the type of photography that I do. I focus my work on adventure and travel photography. And if you guys aren't familiar with my work or with my story, I also used to be a dentist. So 10 years ago, I had no prior knowledge or formal training when it came to photography, had no idea what Lightroom even was 10 years ago. So my photography journey has truly come full circle now that, I'm here to be speaking with you guys as one of Lightroom's ambassadors. And yeah, I'm really excited to share my story. And for me personally, the type of photos that inspire me are different photos that I'm capturing when I'm traveling, with the different people I'm meeting, different cultures I'm experiencing, different experiences. Especially here, if you see, this is just like some examples of my favorite photos. I'm really inspired by architecture, symmetry, colors, and just that feeling of being small in a grand landscape. So I'm really excited to show you how I'm going to be using these new Lightroom features for the next time I go out and I shoot and I'm traveling. I'm going to be thinking about these new features, and I'm going to be thinking about how I can use them after when I go home to edit my photos. So yeah, let's jump right into it. And if there are any questions, I can go ahead and start editing in Lightroom.
No questions so far, Tiffany, but I will pass them on if there are any.
All right, sounds good. Okay, we're going to go over Generative Remove. And for those of you that haven't heard about the new update, Generative Remove is going to be a new way for you to remove basically any unwanted distractions or objects from your photos. And so for me as a travel photographer, I'm very limited on time and also light. And so sometimes, you're waiting for the light to be perfect. You're waiting for there to be no subjects in the image. Maybe you just want a clean landscape photo, or maybe you just want one subject in the photo and you don't want a bunch of tourists around taking photos and being distractions in the image, because really that can, truly make or break the image, right? If you have these distractions here. So I'm going to go over Generative Remove, which is going to be an absolute game changer for all photographers. Whether you're a beginner or you're a professional photographer, this is going to save you so much time and speed up your workflow and your efficiency. I've been using it for the past month, like I mentioned, and I've kind of been going back to some of my old photos I've taken, photos that I thought were unusable, or I was like, okay, I don't want to spend, hours working on this image to make it perfect and clean it up, right? But now I'm kind of digging back into my old photos to see how I can bring these photos to life and kind of give them like a refresh edit. So I'm using Lightroom desktop right now to show you guys an example of how I'm going to edit using Generative Remove. And to save time, I've already edited these images and color corrected everything, but I haven't removed any of the objects, the unwanted objects or distractions. And so if you're using Lightroom CC, it's going to be really easy to follow here. This right here, this is where the new Generative Remove tool is going to be. So you can click here.
And Tiffany,
and you want to make sure.
I'm just going to interject with a question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Someone was just asking where you took this photo.
Okay, yeah. So the story behind this photo, this was in Scotland. And the three people that are in the photo, they're actually all my friends. And, we're all there shooting. There's one person that's modeling to be the subject, and then we have another person kind of taking the view, and another person is getting ready to photograph the subject. So yeah, this was in Scotland a few years ago, and this was an image that I didn't even bother editing because I was like, okay, there's all these distractions in the image. Let me scroll through and see if I have a better image. But now it's like, okay, I want to try to remove these people so I can get just a clean landscape photo here. So yeah, so once you open up the Generative Remove tab here, you want to make sure, this is the new part that you're seeing here where it says Generative AI. You want to make sure this is turned on. You want to check mark this. And so for me, right away, I see these 3 people that I want to remove. I also see small distractions, but I'm not going to use generative AI to remove them because generative AI works best when you're trying to remove a whole object, something that's much larger in the frame, like these people or this person in the foreground. That's when you want to use generative AI. Otherwise, you can just stick with the other Lightroom tools like the healing brush or the clone stamp or just using object aware. So any small, jobs like that, you don't need to use generative AI, but I'm going to show you the power of the new Generative Remove tool when we're editing, trying to remove much larger subjects like this. So you can change your brush size here. You can also use the shortcut keys, which I like to use. So first I'm going to remove, let's start here. You want to make sure that when you're using brush, you're brushing around the entire object that you want to remove and just like slightly larger than that as well. It's going to work best that way. And so if you, like, for example, if you made this brush too big, you can always subtract and you can erase, or you can add if you missed a spot. So that's really nice. We'll hit apply, and now it's going to generate. You also want to keep in mind that it does use Wi-Fi internet connection to use the generative AI remove. So that's something to keep in mind. And just like that, it removed the person. And what I also like about this feature is that there's 3 different variations that it creates for you. So if you go over here, it says variations. So this is 1 of 3. There's also number 2, which looks very good as well. And then the 3rd one. Honestly, all 3 look great to me. But I'm probably just going to go with option 1. But again, all 3 of these are just different variations. But to me, I would honestly use any of them. And I'm usually pretty impressed by the very first variation. And if for some reason you're not happy with it, let's say, AI isn't perfect, right? So sometimes maybe it'll replace your subject with something else that you weren't planning or expecting to see. You can just hit refresh again and it'll generate 3 different variations for you. So yeah, I'm really happy with that one. I'm going to go ahead and continue to remove other unwanted objects. So as I'm erasing, like I mentioned, you want to erase your subject or object and also just slightly around it as well. And hit apply. It's also really cool that it shares like these little tips with you. So that's honestly how I was learning, and it's very intuitive and very easy. Like I said, even if you're a beginner, the user interface is so easy. It just makes it very simple for you. So again, yeah, like pretty much perfect. But we can scroll through the other variations and see, actually, I think I kind of like the second one the best for this one. Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm really liking how this image is looking. And so this one is probably going to be the trickiest person to remove since he was the biggest and closest to the foreground frame. But again, let's give it a try and let's make sure we're going to brush all the way around him. And let's say, for example, I'm going like too much, right? I'm like, oh, wow, I went way too much. I can use this subtract tool and just go ahead and remove that just to make sure it's cleaner. You don't want Gen AI to replace something that doesn't need to be, right? So let's hit apply. And just like the tip I said, for best results, brush over the entire object and any shadows as well. So yeah. Check the different variations. I think this one looks pretty natural. And then I zoom out. Yeah, and you see the before and after. You can see it literally took me like, if I were to do this without explaining, I think it would take me like a minute total. And then for me, I feel like I just really, I I really like to hone in all the details. So even when I'm looking at this picture, I'm like, okay, it looks pretty good, but there's small little minor things that I feel like I can make this image better, right? Like there's this little pole here that I'm not really liking too much, but like I mentioned, if it's a small object and also there aren't textures behind what you're trying to remove, this is very simple because the background is just the ocean, or if it's just the sky, there's no need to use generative AI for that. And so in that case, I can uncheck this and just use object aware, make a much smaller brush and highlight over this. And very easy, right? Super easy for object aware to remove that. There's a little baby sheep here, want to remove. Again, it's a very simple job, so you don't need to use generative AI for that. And yeah, there you go. Before and after. Very nice. So for me, yeah, I feel like this is going to be a game changer for me because I used to go to a location and sometimes I wouldn't even take a photo. I got really picky where, if I saw there were other people around or there's a bunch of signs or there's trash everywhere, even though the landscape was beautiful, but let's say there were so many distractions, like sometimes I would just not even take the photo if I'm in like a busy city, if I'm inside of a church taking a photo and there's a bunch of people, I wouldn't even take a photo. But now I feel like that's really going to change my mindset when I'm taking photos, when I'm traveling. And it's going to be a fun challenge to go home and see, how Generative Remove will use AI to remove these distractions and pretty much bring new life to these images that I thought were unusable. So yeah, I'm very excited to see how I'm going to start using this when I'm traveling. Let's go over another example here where this was a photo taken in Yosemite. If you guys have been to Yosemite, I'm sure you've driven by this church. It's a very famous church in the Yosemite Valley. And this is one of my friends that was here. He was taking a photo on his phone. But I thought it was it's a pretty cool image with the subject, but let's say you wanted to just have a very clean image, right? Or it's also cool to have variations of the photo. So it's like I can go home with just this one image, but I can have a photo of the subject with my friend. And if it's like, oh, I forgot to take a photo with just the plain landscape of the church, without anyone in it. But now I can use Generative Remove and I can have those two options, even though I've only taken one photo. So let's go ahead and, see how this works again. So I'm going to make sure that generative AI is checked. And I'm going to zoom in. I usually like to zoom in when I'm editing just so I can make sure I get all the details and I'm highlighting everything that I need to. I'm going to change my brush size here. Make sure I'm getting everything around him and the bench. I also get the shadow like underneath. And click apply. And here the tip says you can refine the results afterwards. Just like what we talked about with the 3 different variations, you can choose which option you like the best. And so option 1 looks pretty good again. Option 2, just as good. And option 3, I would say maybe not the best, but again, like very, very good. I'm just being really picky with like these like little wood panels here. So I think for me, I'm probably gonna go with option 2. But yeah, all 3 options again look amazing.
This is so cool. This is so cool. I mean, this is like not that long ago. This would have been like hours of work in Photoshop, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? So this is just like, I don't know, for me, I'm so impressed. I'm so wowed by it. And just makes me excited to go out and shoot. Like it's become like a new challenge for me too. And so before, like this was the only image I took from this location, right, with my friend in it. And so going home, like, oh man, I wish I got a photo with like no one in it too, because I don't know. I feel like as a photographer, you sometimes get a little greedy with the type of content you want to get, and you want to capture everything, right? You want to get a clean image without a landscape, without any people in it. I mean, and also you want to get like a clean landscape shot. You want to get a portrait. You want to get like all different types of photos to tell the story, right? And so for me, it's awesome now that I took a photo with a subject in it, and then also, after using Generative Remove, I have this second option without anyone in it. So it's just a completely different look and a different perspective from a location. So yeah, it's to me, it's very exciting. It's definitely going to change how I travel and how I shoot. So now I actually want to jump into using Lightroom Mobile to show you guys how easy it is to edit on mobile as well. So for me, as a travel photographer, I feel like, it's really important to shoot, but then also edit in a timely manner. Doesn't matter if I go home and I have like 2,000 photos, if they're just sitting on my hard drive, I'm never going to see these photos. So for me, sometimes editing in Lightroom Mobile is going to be really helpful because I can turn around these edits a lot quicker. So I'm going to actually share my screen from my phone now to show you guys how easy it is to use Generative Remove on Lightroom Mobile. Okay, awesome. So I feel like, the two examples I showed you guys, I would say they're pretty simple, but they're also very realistic to what, how I would be using the Generative Remove, because for me, I try to pretty much try to dial in all of my compositions in camera. So if possible, if there are other people, I will wait a little bit, to get that perfect image. But now it's like, there are other images where, like I said, pretty much limited on time or light as well. So I'm going to go over this image here, editing on Lightroom Mobile. And this photo I took a couple weeks ago. I was actually in Oaxaca with the Lightroom ambassadors, the other ambassadors, and we went on a trip to Oaxaca. And the purpose of the trip was obviously to get to know each other, to hang out and to bond, meet the rest of the team, but also we wanted to test out these new features. So we were actually keeping in mind, we're taking photos, we're like, oh, look, this would be like a perfect example of using Generative Remove, right? So for me, we went to these hot springs in Oaxaca. I think we woke up at like 3 or 4 in the morning to drive here to get here. So, we would get some nice light. And this photo here is a photo of Jessica, who was nice enough to model for us. She works on the Lightroom team as well. And then there's also Katrine and Pei from the team as well. And they're taking photos of Jessica, but from a different perspective and a different angle. And sometimes when you're shooting
can
with
I interject, Tiffany? I didn't
oh yeah,
even know
sure.
that. That's hilarious. Jessica's a designer on the Lightroom Mobile team, and also apparently a model for Lightroom Ambassador.
Yeah, she
That's awesome.
she added another thing to her resume, and we were all so impressed with her modeling skills that she was perfect for this. So yeah, we have Katrine and Pei taking photos of Jessica from a different angle. So they're getting a different perspective. They're getting their own unique take on this location. For me, I really like this photo because I love the reflection of the tree, of Jessica. I love the leading lines. I love using the rock as a foreground, but also I love the layers of the mountains behind her, right? This photo for me has so many different composition techniques that just made me really excited to get this shot. But, when I go home, it's like, oh, look, this is an awesome photo. But then, there's some distractions that you see here, right? So this was a perfect example of going home and using Generative Remove to kind of bring this artistic vision to life. So I'm going to go over with you how to use Generative Remove on Lightroom Mobile. And so to start here, I'm going to go over to the Generative Remove tab and make sure that you have Generative AI turned on. Okay, so make sure that's on. And like I did in desktop, I like to zoom in when I'm editing. So I make sure I have a big enough brush. And first I'm going to remove the biggest distraction, which, sorry, Katrine, but this is going to be you. And I make sure I get everything around her. And I'm also going to do her reflection. That's really important. You can do this all just with one brush. You don't have to do it in separate removals. So I'll do all of this. And let's see what happens. For me, this is always really fun to see because you never know what it's going to generate, right? So it's like a surprise. So let's see here. And yeah, just like that. First try, it's pretty much perfect, I think. Could also go to refine to see the other options.
Yeah, and just to be clear, you're doing this on your telephone.
Yeah,
So
I'm doing this on my phone.
I'm old enough that I'm never going to get used to that. That's so cool.
So yeah, I think they're all all 3 options look great. I think I'm going to go with option 3 for this one. So yeah, that looks great. And then let's move on to removing pay. Same thing. This one, because there's that bush behind her, I'm going to make sure I'm grabbing that as well. I'm going to brush that just to make sure. And her shadow here. So let's see what we get. Yeah, again, if you want to hit refine, there's the 3 different variations. 2 and 3. Yeah, they all look pretty good. I think I'm going to, again, probably go with option 3. I like that a lot. So if we go here, let's see the before and after what we have so far. So yeah, big difference already. But there's still some minor things that I see that I want to remove. This was her reflection here, so let's remove that. This one's like a little bit more complicated than just having, to remove something from the sky or like something with less texture. So for this one, I still wanted to use generative AI to remove, but this as well, I see some trash here. I'm gonna make the brush smaller. And to me, this is going to make the difference between an image that's just like a good image versus an image that's like amazing or great, right? When you have 0 distractions, it really, I don't know, as the viewer, I feel like it's just has a bigger wow factor when you have no distractions in the photo. So yeah, that looks really good. There's also this weird like metal bar that I don't like here. I'm gonna remove this. And I kind of want to be careful not to remove things that I don't want to remove, like the tree. I don't want to really touch that at all. So I'm trying to be a little more careful there. Let's see what we get. Option 1. Option 2 looks like it added some interesting structures, so I'm not going to go with that one.
And I can throw in a tip on that, Tiffany.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're trying to remove something, it'll take it out and put something else in its place, like you saw it just there. And I've found that I can often get it to not do that if I make my selection bigger. In other words, if I don't hug the object quite so tightly, but make a bigger selection around it, it's less prone to like insert something.
Oh, that's really good to know. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that option too. That's a definite no. So yeah, like Ben said, definitely try to make the selection bigger to avoid this from happening. And so yeah, I'm gonna go with option 3. Another thing to keep in mind is for opacity, I like to keep it at 100 because I'm trying to completely remove the object, right, and fill it with something else. So yeah, I'm really liking how that's looking. And then there's very, very small minor things that I want to remove here, like this bush here. Yeah, kind of like we talked about. I feel like an image like this would have taken me so much longer years ago, right? Or might not even be a usable image. And now it's amazing what you can do with generative AI. So that's looking better. And then this person here, we can definitely remove him as well. And like I mentioned earlier, when you're using generative remove, it works best when there's textures behind what you're trying to remove. It really does. That's like when it's really going to shine, is when there's different textures and layers, just like here. Let's remove these people. I think this is probably the last thing we need to remove. Yeah, I was, again, very happy with the first option. So let's just stick with that. And yeah, this is the final image. Before, we had all these distractions, people, then we had some trash, some metal fencing, other people further out in the distance. Yeah, I mean, to me, you know, before I would probably scroll through Lightroom and I would just probably scroll right past this and say, oh, this image is unusable. But as you can see, after a couple minutes of editing, this is what you're going to get. And again, I'm very happy with this image. It'll definitely go into my favorites folder, and it'll probably be an image that I'll be posting on social media soon. So I'm excited about that.
It's an incredible transformation.
Yeah, it truly is. Yeah, an image that I thought was completely unusable to now being an image that I think is good enough to keep in my portfolio or post on social media that, you know, I'm excited to share. So, yeah, this is, again, just an amazing tool. I think it's going to truly change photography in general. And I love that I not only edited this photo with Lightroom Mobile to, you know, color correct and do the tone curve and use the HSL sliders to really bring, you know, my creative vision to life, but now I can also remove any distractions with the same app, which before I feel like, you know, you'd have to export the image with like a PNG file, right? And then import it into another app and then export it again, and then kind of hope that you're not losing any resolution and keeping the image as high res as possible. But now it's like, I'm doing everything in one app. You know, it's making my workflow a lot faster, a lot smoother, and it's going to be able to basically help me spend less time in front of the computer editing and more time out in the field to be shooting and traveling and adventuring and actually living in the moment and experiencing these different places and experiences. You know, that's going to be a lot more exciting than sitting behind a computer, spending hours upon hours editing, right? So yeah, I'm really excited about that.
And Tiffany, I'll just note as well for the audience that the generative remove edits in Lightroom, just like all of the editing in Lightroom, is completely non-destructive. So all of your original image data is still under there, and you can remove those patches that you did or move them around or whatever you need to do. So fully non-destructive. And then one other thing before I turn it back over to you, Tiffany, I just wanted to pass on. There was a comment in the chat on your photo. It says beautiful with an exclamation point.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that comment. Yeah, and if you guys have any other comments or questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll definitely address them. But again, if you guys are chiming in later, you're just tuning in, I'm going over the new Generative Remove feature using Adobe Firefly. And I'm basically editing some photos that before I thought was either unusable, and I didn't like them because they had unwanted distractions or subjects or objects that, you know, I didn't really care for. Or I'm also going back to some of my favorite photos, which I thought, you know, okay, this was as much as I can edit. You know, I removed as much as I could. I'm happy with this photo, but now I'm going back and kind of giving it like a refresh, a new edit using Generative Remove. So I actually want to go over an edit that I think is pretty tough. This was taken in London at the Natural History Museum. And if you've ever been here before, I would say there's actually not a lot of people in this photo compared to at other times. If you go during peak hours, you know, this place could be much more crowded. But I think we got here as soon as it opened and there were still so many people, right? And so an image like this, yeah, for me personally, I don't think it's an image that I would post on my social media just because my style is more like minimalist when it comes to architecture. And I like have clean images where I either have just one subject or just a clean landscape photo. So when there's a lot of distractions or people, and there's also like signs in this image that I'm not really excited about, for me, it's something that I probably wouldn't post on my personal social media channel. But when I saw this image, when I was going through my archives, I was like, okay, this is a great example. This is a great challenge for me to see how I can use Generative Remove to potentially make this location shine, and yeah, and then make it into a photo where I am excited to put into my portfolio, you know, a photo that I could potentially post on my social media. So let's see how Generative Remove works with a much more complicated scene like this. So first, I'm going to actually remove, I think, the people, and then I'm going to attempt to remove the signs on the side. So again, I like to zoom in, especially on the mobile device. It's so small, you know, the screen is so small that, you know, if you're trying to make these like fine adjustments and brushing over these small fine details, it's a lot harder. So it's really important to zoom in, and you can zoom in as much as you can. So for me, I think this is like a comfortable size here. So I'm going to use the Generative Remove brush and make sure that this is toggled on, and you can change the brush size here. This looks pretty good to me. I'm going to start brushing over what I want removed. And I'm going to also make sure I get their shadows. So I'm going to try and see what I can do in just like this one brush. Might be better to do it like to break it up into smaller edits, but let's just see what happens here. So I feel like this looks pretty good. And let's see what Generative Remove does using AI. And again, you need to have Wi-Fi or internet connection to use Generative AI, because it is connecting to the cloud and the Adobe servers.
And I mentioned this in the chat, Tiffany, but just to reiterate here, one of the advantages of that is that it takes a tremendous amount of processing power to produce the kind of results that you're seeing here. And so we're able to offload that from your phone and do it on the server instead. So it enables this kind of functionality on much lower end devices than might be possible otherwise.
Yeah, it's actually surprisingly very fast, I think. How fast it's doing this. So I'm really impressed with the speed as well. So as you can see, I think that took 30 seconds in total to do. That's pretty amazing. Look at all those people, and there's different options again, 1, 2, or 3. I think I'm gonna go with probably 3 for this one, just to make sure I'm matching the lines of like the floor down here. It looks very realistic to me. Yeah, that looks so good to me. So I'm gonna save that, and then again, let's try to remove these people over here. This one I probably will do, and I'll break it up though. I think this is just, there's way too many people here, so let's just do it in sections. So I'm going to remove the unwanted objects and also their shadows. And let's see what happens.
Tension's killing me.
Again, perfect. Honestly, like, I'm just so impressed. Like, all 3 options look great. I'll just go with option 1. And this one, let's just try doing one try again. Let's just see what we can do. Removing all these people. And I'm kind of outlining them, but I'm jumping around because I don't want to remove, I don't want to put like a huge box around everything, right? So I want to make sure I'm still being somewhat careful with how I'm removing people here. So let's see. And just like the tip says, for removing smaller spots, you can turn off generative AI to save time. But this is a much larger job, so this is exactly when you want to use AI. And again, pretty good job. Let's see. 1, 2, or 3. See, there's small things you need to look at. Like for 2, I would say this isn't like a perfect job here. So I would not go with option 2. Option 3 looks pretty good to me. Option 1 looks good as well.
And you can also always go over one again. So like if you do one and you're like, oh, this is pretty good, but it didn't like get this thing out well right here, you can like go over that spot again, one little part that didn't work.
Yeah, definitely. You could also go to restore and you can see what happened there. Yeah, you can. Well, actually, I want to. Yeah, okay. So yes, this is what we have here, and I mean, already it's transforming this image into something completely different, right? It looks like I'm here all of them by myself. Like it's like kind of like I got like a private access to the Natural History Museum without any guests here, right? So yeah, it's just the magic of generative remove using AI now. So I'm just so impressed. Honestly, this would have taken hours, or maybe I feel like this would have been an image where I would have tried to edit this and I would have been like, wow, this is taking way too long. I don't even think it's like worth it. And I probably would have started the edit and probably would have walked away, grabbed a couple snacks, come back, look at it again and said like, no, I don't think it's worth it. And probably just, completely skipped over the edit. So yeah, this is bringing new life to a photo that I thought was not usable at all. And so let's actually try to remove this sign, which I think is going to be very tricky because look at all these textures and details on the walls here. It's very intricate, right? So let's see what it does here. Make sure I have the right brush size. I'm going to remove this metal bar here. And I'm going to remove, sorry, I like dinosaurs, but I don't care for this sign here, or where it says free gallery. So make sure to remove all of this. And let's see what happens.
We need some like interstitial music while these run, I think.
I know,
Oh my
that would
gosh,
be
look
amazing.
at that. Look at that.
Yeah, that's just crazy. Yeah, I'm honestly just so impressed and so loud. Every time I do this, like I'm like kind of holding my breath because I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's it gonna look like? And every time it like just wows me. So that was option 1 and variation 1. Variation 2 also looks very good. Variation 3 as well. I mean, look at the detail and like the columns. That's just wild to me. Sometimes I'll zoom out too, because it's like you want to get the big picture and you want to make sure it's matching with the beams off to the right of it. So I'll look at it again and see which one I like best. I think I like option 3. I think that looks pretty good.
It looks like
yeah,
it's matched that underlighting really nicely that's on
Yeah, I mean, even the
card.
lighting, that's like incredible.
Yeah.
That looks so good. Okay, I'm gonna go with that one. And let's see the before and after here. Wow. Let's try again with this other side with the other sign here. Same thing.
Oh, the seal. So cute.
Make sure you're going all the way around and like a little bit, extending a little bit beyond the object as well. That's what we get here. Yeah, and again, I love the little tips that they're mentioning here. It's very helpful. Wow, yeah. What a surprise, right? Perfect again. Variation 1, variation 2, variation 3. Wow, this one's tough. I feel like all 3 of them look really good. So then I'll zoom out to see. Yeah, it just depends what you like. I kind of like option 1 because I like the lighting to match the other side. And yeah, this is it. This is the
On your
before
phone.
and after. Yeah, literally
So
editing
good,
on my
Tiffany.
phone right now. Yeah, this is just so crazy. And I think without, going over the different features and kind of talking out loud for you guys, I feel like if I were to do this just straight, just go straight through by myself, I think it would probably take me, I would say no more than 5 minutes. So yeah, it's going to save so much more time, less time in front of the computer and more time actually out in the field. So very, very exciting stuff for us photographers. You could be beginner, professional, doesn't matter. I think this is going to change the game for any skill level. Doesn't have to be for professional work, can just be for taking, a family photo. And there's unwanted distractions in the image, and you can go ahead and remove them all on your phone. You don't need to have fancy camera equipment. You don't need to have a laptop. You can do everything on your phone. And that's something that I would say most of us are using on a daily basis. So it's an amazing new tool that we can use, and for me, it's truly going to change my life, I think.
They're timing us they're timing you in the chat, Tiffany. Keys says 5 minutes and with the chatter too. So
okay, 5 minutes. Okay.
it's
All right.
quick.
So, okay, another thing I want to go over is, because for me, the generative remove is what I'm most excited about. So that's what I wanted
to be clear, I don't rush. That wasn't 5 minutes left. That was just saying it took 5 minutes for you to remove
5
all the
minutes.
stuff
Okay,
from the photo.
sorry.
We have about 15 minutes left.
Okay, amazing. Perfect. Yeah, pretty much right on schedule. So yeah, the generative remove is definitely the feature that I'm most excited about. The one that I'm going to be using the most, I think. But there's also lens blur. So for those of you that don't know, lens blur was it was out in the beta version, right? We had like the pre-release version for lens blur, where basically if you have an image with the subject, let's say you're taking a portrait, and you wanted to create what's called bokeh. And what that is basically it's keeping your subject in focus, and your background is going to be blurred to give you that more stylized or dramatic look. And so that's what lens blur was doing. It was blurring out the background in post in Lightroom. And so now with the new update today, there's enhancements with lens blur. So it has better subject detection. You can now make presets. You can create your own presets using the different lens blur options. And there's going to be 7 new adaptive presets. That's super exciting. I'm going to go over that today. And you can also do select batch editing. So you can copy the blur settings on one image, and then let's say you took like a bunch of photos like burst mode, and you wanted to copy over all the different settings for that. You can do that, and now also include lens blur for that as well. So very, very exciting new features for lens blur. And I'm going to show you how to use this on Lightroom Mobile. So this is a photo I took in California at a place called Big Sur. The specific place is called McWay Falls. If you look on the far left side, there's a waterfall that's just coming out of the rocks. It's truly like a magical location. It's an amazing place. And so when I was taking this photo, I really like this composition because there's the foreground of, like the shrubs in the front, there's the rocks. This was also a long exposure photo that I took, taken on a tripod, using an ND filter, because I wanted to like create this like dreamy look. And that's why you see the water looks silky and smooth, because it's a long exposure. And so this was taken at sunset, or I guess golden hour. Yeah, just before sunset. So the foreground's lit up, the water's like lit up. It's nice teal turquoise color. And so, yeah, this is one of my favorite photos. And I took this photo many years ago, but, again, I was like, how can I re-edit this photo? How can I give it a refresh using the new features? So this is a great example of how I'm going to use lens blur to create a brand new edit to show you guys. So when you go over to blur, actually, yes. You go
I'm
to
super
blur
curious
here.
to see this, Tiffany. This is not the kind of photo that I ever would have thought to use this on. I can't wait to see what you're going to do.
Yeah. So let's see what happens here. So if you've never used lens blur before, it's really cool because you can adjust the blur amount, and that just basically means how in focus or out of focus the subject or whatever you're trying to blur, the strength of it, right? So for me, if you go too far here off to the right, as you can see, the foreground is very out of focus, but if you go more in the middle here, it's kind of like cutting it 50-50, right? And so for me, I think for me personally, I'd like to go somewhere around here. Yeah, I think this looks really nice because now you see like the shrubs in the foreground and the rocks, they're out of focus, and it's just giving it a different look. It's more stylized. And what I like about this is that there's no right or wrong way to use lens blur. It comes down to your own creative vision. So, someone else might say, oh, has too much bokeh for me, right? It has too much separation of the foreground and the background for me. But then someone else could say, wow, this looks very artistic and it looks really nice. So you can also use this focus range here where you can choose where the focal range is going to be. So if I'm near, it's going to choose the shrubs in the foreground, and that's going to be in focus. And then, then the waterfall and the ocean, that's going to be all out of focus. For me, in this particular shot, it doesn't do much for me. It's because I don't want to focus on these shrubs. It's not very exciting, right? So for me, I would probably veer more towards something more in this focal range where it's like in the middle, right? That's probably what I would do. But if all of this seems a little bit kind of like just a little complicated for you, or you're a beginner and you're like, I don't understand what these different things mean, like what's bubble or what's 5-blade ring, that's just the shape of the bokeh. And but to some people it might be a little too much, and it might be a little bit over your head. And what I like about the new update, is, I'm going to actually reset all this. Now there are presets. If you go here, there are new presets here. When you go under, let me show you again. It's the far left here on the bottom. Click here and then go to premium, and then where it says adaptive blur background. If you click on that, there's going to be 7 new presets. The last one is just resetting, which is bringing you back to your original image. But basically these presets it's using AI to detect the image and the subject, and it's creating its own preset using what we were doing just a second ago in lens blur, but that was like manually adjusting the settings. Now we're using AI and using these presets to create lens blur and blurring the foreground or background. And this is really cool because it's just one click versus before you kind of have to do it manually. So again, if you're someone that maybe isn't as knowledgeable with photography or using lens blur or editing, or someone that just wants to save time, this is going to be really helpful for you. And for me, I think I'll probably be using this a lot more as well, because I focus my photography more on travel and landscape. But when I do take portraits or photos of my dog, I think this is going to be great. It's going to be quick, and it's going to make my photo just more interesting and more dynamic. So, for example, I can show you, let's go and try circle. So as you can see here, if you click in the middle, you can choose the amount. You can choose the amount of blur, right? So if you go to 200%, that's quite a lot of blur for me at least. So yeah, I like to kind of use around, I would say somewhere around here for me is like the sweet spot, between like 60 and 80 for a landscape photo, that is, right? If I had a portrait of a person, maybe I want to add a little bit more blur, but again, it's personal preference. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's, again, just your artistic vision and what looks good to you and how you want to share your story with the image. So yeah, this is with one click. That's how easy it was to blur out the foreground to give it a different look. So before was a very straight up image. Everything was in focus. I shot this at f8, which makes sense. That's why the foreground, the midground, and the background are all in focus. But now using the preset, lens blur preset, I pretty much made this f8 photo look like I took it with a lens with an aperture of f2.8, having a more shallow depth of field, right? And so what's really cool about this is that you don't have to have, you don't have to have a fancy prime lens that stops down to 1.8, 1.4. I shot this at f8, and I was able to edit in post to give it that same bokeh look, that same dramatic effect. So just one example of using the new adaptive lens blur background with a landscape photo. But now I want to show you an example with more of like a portrait photo.
And Tiffany, just heads up, we have about 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. This is a photo of my friend's dog. So I'm not big on taking like portraits of people. That's just not my style, but I love taking portraits of animals and especially cute dogs. And so we were on a hike here in Washington, and this was a photo I took of my friend's dog. His name's Finn. And so I'm going to show you how to use the presets here. And for this one, I think I'm gonna, sorry, it's taking a second to load. And again, there's 7 presets.
And sorry, can I interrupt real quick, Tiffany?
Yeah.
What it's doing there when it's churning along, like working to make those preset thumbnails, is it's using AI to detect the depth in the image. So it's building a depth map of the image. So it's not gonna, it doesn't just do a cutout of the subject and blur the background uniformly. It blurs different parts of the photo more or less based on how close or far away from the camera they are. So that's what it's doing, is like figuring out the depth while it's turning
Oh, okay.
along.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I'm like, oh, I thought it was like maybe my internet connection or something.
No, and
yeah,
the reason it didn't do that with the other photo when you came in is because you'd already had the manual blur controls open for that other photo. So it had
okay.
already
Gotcha.
calculated the depth map for the other photo.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So for this one, I'm going to try to use strong. And if you click on the middle circle here, this allows you to control the amount of blur that you're going to use. So from 0, and you see where it's adding blurs in the background. It's not going to do it to the subject here because I want Finn. I want this puppy to be in focus. That's the point of using lens blurs, to kind of accentuate the subject and make it pop more, and remove the background a bit more if it's not as interesting, or it can be distracting. So I'm going to increase the amount of blur here. And even at 200%, like, I think it looks really nice. It softens the image quite a bit. So maybe I don't want to go, full 200, but for like the landscape photo I showed you before, I was hovering around here, around 60, 70. But I think for a portrait, I would actually want to go a little more. And I like how it looks, more here where the background is even more blurry. And so we have before, which I thought was already a really nice portrait, but I can make this edit even better by adding even more bokeh. And it's just really nice, clean, buttery look. I don't see any weird artifacts or anything weird happening with the image. I think it looks really clean, really nice, and very, very realistic to me. And what's awesome was that it took me like seconds to do with just one click, all within one app. After I edited the photo, you can kind of go in order. You can edit the exposure, the colors, and then you can edit blur, just like how you see the tabs here. That's how I would go and edit. I would edit from like left to right using the different tabs. It's just makes my workflow a lot easier, and it's just very intuitive. So yeah, it's just a great example of using one of the presets. And then you can copy this preset if you wanted to. You could copy settings here, and now you can check lens blur if you wanted to. And you can copy that and say I wanted to go back to another image. Let's say this picture of a bear, and say I can hit paste, and it's going to copy over all the edits plus the lens blur, which I'm not going to do since it's a different image and different colors. But for example, I'm just showing you how you can copy and paste all your settings, including lens blur now, it's really helpful if you have different options of the same photo, but say, you take it, like you took burst photos over a span of a couple seconds, and, one photo, your eyes closed, but then other photos, the eyes are open, everything looks nice. You could just copy over the edit and then just paste it. So that's going to save, a ton of time. So that's pretty much lens blur and generative remove all in Lightroom today. So if you guys have any questions for me, let me know. But I'm for one, very, very excited to use these new features and continue to use them when I'm traveling.
There are applause in the chat for you there. And yeah, any last questions, pop them in the chat. Otherwise, it is time for us to wrap up. Tiffany, this has been so fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And thank you for sharing both your awesome photography and these cool new features coming in Lightroom. For everybody watching, thank you for joining us as well. And if you want to try out Generative Remove and Lens Blur, they are available in the latest release of Lightroom on the desktop, on mobile, on the web, also in Lightroom Classic, also in Adobe Camera Raw. It's all available today. Stay tuned on Adobe Live. Next up is photography with Aaron Nace coming up soon. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Tiffany.
Anytime. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, friends. I hope that you have been enjoying the streaming thus far. My name is Idara Ekpo. I'm really excited to be here for you guys as we continue the really exciting activities that we have all focused around Lightroom. As always, please go ahead and drop where you're joining from the chat. I know I'm just kind of entering in the room. I know that y'all have been here for some time, but go ahead and drop in the chat where you're joining us from. Today, we are joined with photographer Aaron Nace, who is also the founder of Phlearn, as he demonstrates his refined approach to using Lightroom to edit his captivating photos. Excuse me. Aaron, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you, Adara?
I am good. I'm good. Quick question. Where are you joining us from?
I am in North Carolina. What about you?
Ooh, Phoenix, Arizona.
All
I have
right.
never been to North Carolina. Have you ever been to
Well,
Phoenix?
briefly, yeah. It's
Oh,
a nice spot. I like Arizona a lot. I spent some time in Tucson. I love it there.
hmm
Yeah. Spent
Oh,
some time
lovely.
down south near the border. It's
Wow.
near the Patagonia Mountains. I love Arizona.
Oh, wow. I love to hear that. I love to hear that. People don't always have the best things to say about Arizona. I'm like, it's so beautiful here. They're like, what's in Arizona? I'm like, beauty. That's what's here.
It is. It really is.
But yeah, so I'm really excited for today, Aaron. I know that we're gonna go ahead and hop right into it. If y'all again have any questions, comments that you want to drop in the chat, please be free to do so. I'll be sure to relay them all to Aaron, and really excited, especially because we're gonna be touching on some new Lightroom features. Really excited, as you guys know, that we've had a launch of a number of different features, including Generative Remove, Lens Blur, Adaptive Presets for blurring your background. So I'm really excited. And Aaron, go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you so we can talk a little bit about what we're going to be focusing on today.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Thank you so much, Adara. We're going to be focusing the first part of today's stream on the new generative AI object removal within Lightroom Classic. I'm so excited this has come to Lightroom Classic. And
Yes.
honestly, it's incredibly easy to use. Obviously, we've seen this in Photoshop now for a while. It's been, just the most amazing tool. So to see it to come to Lightroom is, I've been anticipating this for a while. I know a lot of people have like, when's it coming to Lightroom?
Yep.
It's finally here. So today we're going to show you how to use it. We got a bunch of different examples. Let's go ahead and jump in. So
Perfect.
we're going to start off with this example. We've got our subject here in the main part of the image, and then we've just got this guy here in the background. So I want to get rid of him. He's just a little bit of a distraction. So we're going to go right to our remove tools, just like we had before. Now you have a few different options for your remove tools. So you have this new remove option, then you have healing and clone snapping. So they haven't completely taken those away. There's still an option if you want them. But with your remove tool, you have generative AI, and you can click on this information button to see what it actually does. But it's incredibly easy to do. Basically, you just have a brush. So we're going to show you how to do it. Basically, we're going to start off painting right on the area you want to remove. And just like Gen Fill in Photoshop, basically you just want to cover just the area. You don't need to make it any bigger. And basically here we're painting instead of making a selection. So in Photoshop, you use a selection tool to start and then do Gen Fill. Here we're painting. So once you went ahead and painted over top of the thing you want to remove, then you have the options for mask refinement here on the right-hand side. You can see you can add to the mask if you want to, or you can subtract. So we'll show you how to do that. Just click on the subtract button, and then you can just subtract out and make the selection a little bit smaller if you need to. There we go. We'll just kind of like, bring that closer to our subject, and you can change your brush size here. Now, when you're done, all you have to do is click on apply. We'll go ahead and click there, and you see generative remove, and you can see it is generating right now. There we go. And just like that,
Love
that person
that.
is gone. How amazing is that?
That was so quick. Like it was like what, like 2 seconds, and it would just remove that. I personally, I'm so excited about this launch because, like you mentioned before, this is already in Photoshop, and I have been using this generative AI expand everything, remove, like no one's business. Like when I take photos, I'm like, oh, I can remove it later. Like I'm just so spoiled now, but I'm
It
so
spoils you.
excited. It does, but I really love that it's over in Lightroom, and I really love that you pointed out how you could use the brush opposed to Photoshop, where you're kind of making a selection tool. I think that kind of, for me personally, I say that a brush is a bit easier because you can make a quick selection opposed to maybe trying to be more accurate with using like the lasso tool or whatever tool that you're using to make your selection in Photoshop.
Exactly, exactly. I love this workflow. I think the brush works really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's cool, just like in Photoshop, we actually have some variations. So
Oh.
you can go through them. If I just click on this next one, you can see that we've got all these different variations that it generated. So we can see, you know, like if we don't like something perfectly, it's not that big of a deal. And you can click on this refresh icon here, which basically just does another generation, and that's going to give you 3 more options. There we go. So you can see here it's generating 1 more time. And this is going to give us 3 brand new options. So basically the same functionality that we have in Photoshop. The workflow is just a little bit different. But once you know how to use it, it's like, okay, cool. I pretty much know exactly what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
And you can see, yeah, it works perfectly. It's really, really cool.
Yes.
So let's go for a couple more examples. We have this example here, and we just have like a lot of, you know, kind of like out of focus area stuff, but it's just distractions. You know, I would say anytime you have something that's, you know, pulling attention away from your subjects, it's time to remove it. So let's go ahead and paint here. There we go. And you can see, you can use your open and close brackets, just like the regular brush tool in Photoshop and in Lightroom for your healing and spot. And yeah, basically we're just starting off by painting over the things we want to remove. Let's use the open bracket a couple times. Make our brush a little bit smaller. There we go. And you can see this is a pretty complicated object. Like historically, you would pretty much have to go into Photoshop to remove something like this.
Yep.
And honestly, it would kind of take a while. Like
no, it definitely would take a while. And I also know there's a lot of creatives that I personally use both Lightroom and Photoshop in my workflow, but it took me a while to get comfortable in Photoshop. So I think this is really great because it removes that intimidation to being able to do a lot of this editing, which is really great.
You're totally right. It removes it. And if you're familiar with Lightroom now, you know, there's, you know, this makes Lightroom just that much more powerful.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm gonna be, you know, really excited to be using Lightroom moving forward.
Yes.
So we've got all those objects basically painted out. I don't need to subtract from this at all. Let's just go ahead and hit apply right here, and you can see it's going to generate. Now, sometimes what happens is it'll do like most of the job really well, and then some of it, it'll just kind of like leave it behind. So we'll see here, because I actually wound up trying to remove quite a bit from these photos. So we'll see what it does. But if you need to, you can always go back and remove more, which is really, really nice. Okay,
oh, wow.
So you can see
okay, yeah,
pretty good there. So there's the before, and here's the after. Honestly, I think it did a really, really good job. There we go. This area here, I want to go ahead and remove that. And the nice thing is you don't have to undo anything that you've done. You can do this kind of like layers, where basically now I could just go in and paint even more. And I'm like, you know what? I want to remove this stuff too. So let's go ahead and paint over there. Fantastic. And this thing sticking up. There we go. And then we'll just go ahead right over here and hit apply one more time. So I would recommend kind of doing this like as its own step, and maybe even at the beginning of your editing.
Yes.
Because you can still go in here and adjust like the sky, you know, like the subjects. You can still use all your traditional masking tools. We'll do that in just a second. But it basically works over top of this generative fill, which is so nice. There we go. Let's go ahead and do that. So you can see I'm just kind of doing this step by step by step, making sure everything is removed that we want to get rid of.
And it's so seamless, even though you have to go, you're wanting to make sure you're being accurate. You can see how clean all of this is coming. And it's not really like it's saving you so much time, because you mentioned before, like you would historically you would have to go into Photoshop and it would take so much time. But within a couple of minutes, you've just removed such a difficult object.
I know. Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And you can see here, let's just go back to the original. So like that giant satellite dish or whatever behind our subjects, and here the after completely gone.
Yep.
So cool. So let's go ahead and get out of our remove tool, and I just want to show everyone how you can continue to edit. So we're going to go here to our masking tools. Let's go ahead and click on our masking. Now we're going to use the sky mask. So let's go ahead and click on sky to make a mask out of the sky. You can see it's done a great job selecting there. And I'm going to just take our highlight levels and bring that down a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to bring my color temperature a little bit more blue. There we go. And let's maybe bring our saturation up just a little bit. I'm going to make that a tiny bit warmer. So you can see here, let's just go back in time a little bit. There we go. So before I did any adjustments, the sky looked pretty good, but I'm still able to bring in and make that sky much brighter and much more noticeable. I'll just hit that slash key. So here's the before and the after with everything. So we removed all those objects, and after we did the removal, we still went in and made the sky a little bit more blue, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I really love how it's able to still detect the sky, even though there was an object there previously. Once you removed it, it's able to still identify the whole area as part of the sky, which I think is great because you would think, like in my head, I'm not, again, an engineer of any type, but in my head, I would think it's quite difficult because you have to, there was an object there in the photo that would have been detected. If you had even in the beginning did the sky, use the mask to identify the sky, it would have been around the satellite. So being able to remove it and it still detects that area very, very accurately is really great.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but it's really, really cool. All right, let's do one more thing here. I just want to add a mask here. Let's go to create a new mask. I'm just going to do like a radial gradient, and we'll just click and drag here out from the center. There we go on our subjects. And let's just make that just a little bit brighter here, right where our subjects are. There we go. And we'll bring up the shadows just a little bit there as well. I think this is looking really good. And then I maybe want to make it warmer from the left. So let's go ahead and create a new mask. We're going to go down to a radial gradient one more time. Let's click and drag out there, just like this. And then let's bring our color temperature just a little bit warmer. Fantastic, to kind of make it look like a sun flare. Let's go ahead and bring that out there. All right, there we go. So there's our before and our after. You can basically see all this. Here we go. Let's just hide those tools right there. So our before and our after. I mean, that's a lot of editing we did in a short period of time within Lightroom. It's absolutely stunning.
Oh, I love that's so beautiful. And if you guys have any questions throughout the stream, I'm just going to throw in a reminder. Please drop the questions in the chat. That way I can be sure to read them, and that way we can make sure this is as engaging as it needs to be, because this is a lot of new information.
It really is. That's why we have so many examples. So this other example here, I'm really excited about because we're going to remove a ton of different things. We're going to really, really clean this one up. So let's go to our remove tool again, and you can see it's located right here where the remove tool has always been in Lightroom. So you don't have to really learn that much. It's pretty intuitive. You want to remove something, still go to your remove tool. Okay, so we're going to start off by painting. Let's just use the open and close brackets on our keyboard to make our brush larger and smaller. Now, one tip I'll say, if you want to remove something like this, make sure you get the shadow or the reflection as well. You know, you don't want to remove an object and then still have the shadow remain. So I went ahead and painted larger just to make sure the shadow's gone too. So let's go ahead and select that. We're going to click on, we're still in our remove tool. We're going to go to apply right here. And you're going to see it's going to go ahead and generate this and remove it. And we're going to just, boom. I mean, can you believe that? Wow. It's perfect.
Oh, I love the tip that you gave about the shadows. I think sometimes we can, if we're not paying attention to details such as that, you're just thinking about the object. Let me just remove the object. But of course, naturally, there are maybe like in that case, there was a shadow of the ball. If you had just removed the ball and left the shadow, it would be so unnatural. And you could tell some editing was done here. Whereas this is so seamless. So I think that's a great tip as well.
Yeah, it's perfect. So we're going to remove this bottle too. And you can see I painted a little bit over our subject's knee, but that's okay. It's going to regenerate that area of our subject as well. So it'll know that we want to get rid of that. Let's go ahead and click here on apply. Today, I mean, we have some really big releases today, honestly. This is kind of like game changer. I'm super excited to be on this stream because both of what we're going to talk about, this generative AI here in Lightroom and the lens blur, which we're going to show in just a little bit. I mean, they're game changers. They're huge.
Absolutely game changers. And I'm really excited for the lens blur because I think I'll save my comments for when we enter that portion of our streams, but I'm really, really excited about that part too.
I am too. I love it. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and just remove these cracks here and click on apply. Yeah, I'm so excited for the generative AI to be in Lightroom.
Yep.
I feel like we all got exposed to the generative AI in Photoshop.
Absolutely.
So it's so funny how something can go from like groundbreaking to like, okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when we first saw generative AI, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this exists. And now you want it to be in everything you do, right?
Yep.
It's like, okay, when's this going to be in Lightroom? You know, so now that it's in Lightroom, you know, we're all very happy that it's in Lightroom, but it's, you know,
we've been spoiled.
We've been spoiled by it. We've been totally spoiled. You're exactly right.
But it's great because it really has allowed us to kind of not have to spend so much time on the technical aspects and really just focus on creating. I think there's so many parts of photography and editing and creating that tend to be really intimidating. And now with these tools, they're simplified and they're still so powerful and they get the job done. So now all I'm focusing on as a photographer is just creating the best image that I can create without being like, oh, I don't know how to use this tool, use these masks, X, Y, and Z. But now you have a tool that you can use to your advantage, which I think it's groundbreaking, honestly.
It really is. It really is. And sometimes it doesn't maybe give you the exact result you want, but that's okay. So here's the before. We can see here's the after. It gives us like a different type of watch. But all we have to do is go right over here to our variations and we just click and do a couple more variations and look at that.
It's gone.
Right there, it's gone. And that's exactly what we would want. How cool is this? So we've gone from this image before where we had the, you know, this ball here, the water bottle, these cracks over here, and the watch. Now we have something a lot more clean where we have, you know, just our subject and she's wearing some like nice jewelry and some athletic clothing as well. So you can really like, you can style this in so many ways. So the last thing we're gonna do, we can go in here and remove this jewelry as well. So like, you know, if you're working with a client and you want to try, you know, styling your photo shoots in a few different ways, you know, they can come back and say like, okay, cool, let's do something that's super clean. Let's get rid of all the jewelry. Let's get rid of all the accessories. Like, let's make this look a lot more, you know, like she's just out for a run. You might not wear jewelry when you're out for a run, right?
Very true, yes.
So we can go in here and, you know, highlight them. You can see I'm using a smaller brush here, just trying to get just the area where the jewelry is. There we go. Especially for like people and things like that. You want to try to, you don't want to make this brush too big or you'll wind up generating like, you know, a new shoulder or something like that. There's just no reason for that. Her shoulders already. Yeah, exactly. We can refrain from all that. There we go. And here you can see it gave her a different necklace, which is kind of funny. Let's click on this next and click on next again. You can always click on refresh if it doesn't do exactly what you want. Or if this doesn't do it on the second go round, we'll make our brush a little bit bigger and then we'll hit paint again. All right, so we're going to go through our different options. All right, well, let's just go back in time to the original one. Don't forget, you still have your history here in Lightroom, so you can go back and see back to this. There we go. Let's go back to the history. Now let's make our brush just a little bit bigger. There we go. And fantastic. So by making our brush a little bit bigger, we're kind of telling the program like, okay, we want to get rid of. We want it gone. Exactly. Exactly. We want this gone. All right. So we have another necklace. There we go. Now it's completely gone. There we go. We have a few different options there, and that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and zoom out, and you can see now we have a very, very natural looking image. So here's, I'm going to hit that slash key on our keyboard. So there's our before and after. There we go. Let's just hit tab and shift tab so you can see nice and clean. There we go. And I'm going to hit command. There we go. Let's just zoom in. Perfect. So there's that before and after. Look how big of a difference that makes. Honestly, it's really groundbreaking. So you can work with a client on set and they can be like, okay, cool, this looks good. Let's try a version that's just like cleaned up with all this stuff gone. This is much more about the portrait. This is a lot more about like trying to set a scene with like their exercising and things like that. So just a lot of possibility here, which I think is so, so, so exciting.
Oh, I love
All
this.
right. It's so nice. Okay, let's go to our next example here.
Oh, I love this photo. He's
It's
so
just
like
such-
his outfit, the color coordination. It's so clean and fly. Oh, I love.
It's on point, right? I want to be
It's
this
true.
guy.
Honestly.
Yeah. I'm like, you got it right, dude.
Yep. I can tell you are enjoying life. I want to be enjoying like you.
Yes. 100%. So now let's try doing like a little bit more complicated stuff because we have people in the background here that are, just a little bit like the portrait is definitely about this guy in the front, right? And these people in the background are just kind of like there. So we'll see if we can remove them. There we go. And then let's click up here on apply. Boom. I know, I love this photo. It's so, so good.
It's so nice. The colors, especially even the colors with how it matches with oh, okay.
Right? Like
she's gone. Girl, be gone.
She is gone. Can you believe it works this
and
well?
it's just so clean.
It's so clean. It's so easy. You don't expect something so good to be so easy too.
That part,
and,
yep.
That's when technology is just the best, when it's like, it's easy, it's perfect, and you don't even have to. I'm doing this on my trackpad. I used to do this stuff in Photoshop manually, and it would take me hours and all these special tools, and now it's like, psh, don't even worry about it. Let's click on apply right over here. I know, man.
It just the time you save. It's because I'm the kind of person that when I shoot, it's a photographer, when I shoot, I would be so specific about making sure that there were things that there wasn't anything that I felt like I needed to go and remove and post, because I just did not like sitting down spending time. So it was like, but even though that was something I would try to do, there are going to be times where you're shooting around other people where you can't avoid it. I would see the photos and be like, I love this shot, but I really do not like that I have all these other people in the photo. But I feel like I don't feel comfortable or want to spend the time spending hours trying to remove people. But now, I just love that you could just utilize generative AI in this way. And I love that it's in Lightroom, because there's so many people that are, that use both apps, but a lot of people who just feel comfortable in Lightroom. So they're not all being able to have access to such a powerful tool. And that's just really great.
It's so, so good. So this photo, I love it because we're going to do two different examples. So we just did this generative fill. Like, this is before and after in Lightroom. I mean, just so, so cool. But the next tool that we want to introduce is the lens blur in Lightroom. Have you gotten a chance to play around with the lens blur, Dara?
Yes. Did
it blow you away?
It blew me away. And you know why it blew me away specifically? I think when we talk about like photographers specifically, and you think about gear and lens cameras that you want to purchase that maybe have a low f-stop, or maybe you bought a new camera, you're starting out and you have a kit lens and you're like, oh wow, I'm not getting that great bokeh effect. Now you can utilize the tools that are put into these applications in Lightroom to still get the same effect. And so I really, really love that for that reason, because I know I started off with a kit lens. I now I've spent money on some camera lenses specifically for that low f-stop to really get the bokeh, and especially when it comes to portraiture. So I love that this is added in here.
I do too. Well, let's go ahead and check it out. So we're going to go right here to lens blur. It's its own menu item. Now this has been in beta in Lightroom Classic for a while, but now it's in the general release. So let's go ahead and click on apply. There we go. This is going to automatically detect our subject. And here we can see we can just change our blur amount. So if I want the background to be more or less blurry, There you go. Literally, that's all it is a slider, and you go from 1.4 to 1.2, from 2.8 to 1.4.
Exactly.
Just like that. And it works incredibly, incredibly well. And I couldn't be more pleased with this photo.
Oh, that's
Now,
beautiful.
with this lens blur, we do have some advanced features. So we're going to go into our library, and I've got some amazing images here that we're going to go through and apply this to. So starting off here, such a cool photograph. We got our guy doing some breakdancing, but this background is perfectly in focus, just as in focus as he is. So they're kind of competing for attention a little bit. So now we can go into our develop module. We go to our lens blur, just click on apply. It's going to automatically analyze our image, as you can see, find our subject. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and change this blur amount. I'm going to crank it all the way up. But you can see what's happened here is our subject got a little bit blurry, right? But that's not a big deal at all because we have all these fantastic tools we can use. So this tool right here basically is your focus range. It shows you what's in or and out of focus. Now you can click on this where it says visualize depth. Let me go ahead and click on that. Okay. And this is basically going to tell me what is in focus. So like the yellow areas are supposed to be in focus, and then the purple areas are out of focus. Now you can click here and kind of move this to the right or the left. There we go. And when you move this, basically the lighter areas become in focus, so that like what's white right now, that's like in focus. If I move it to the right, you can see it's going to put the background in focus. So I'm going to just put this all the way to the left, and I can turn off visualize depth. There we go. And now my subject's in focus, the background's in focus. So this is kind of like how you use this tool, but actually there's a better, easier way.
Okay.
So right here where it says focus range and you got this slider and visualize depth and all that stuff, you know what? You don't even really need to do that. So let's go to our next example. You can see our subject looks great. We just have like this background here is totally in focus too. So we're going to go ahead and apply this. There we go. Now we're going to just crank this up, and we're going to pretend that it, blurred the wrong thing. Let's say it's like blurring on your subject instead, right? So the easiest way to do this is this tool right over here. So you got, which says focus range, you got your little slider here. This is person detection, which is great, but this is actually, in my opinion, the best way to do it. So you click on this little icon right here. It looks like a target, okay? With that target, then you just go over to your subject and you just click and drag a little marquee right around your subject and let go. And look at that. As soon as you do that, it identifies, okay, that's what you want to be in focus, and then everything else is going to be out of focus. So it dials in this focus range perfectly. You don't have to worry about these sliders. You don't have to worry about visualize depth. It just makes it exactly what you want pretty much every time. Now you can change your focus. I mean, look at that. How it's magic, honestly. And some of these tools, you would expect, like, if you go too far, it starts to look horrible, but this one still looks good.
Yep, exactly. I know. I was just gonna say the same thing. It's like no matter how far you're pushing that lens blur, it still looks so good.
Still looks good. So let's push it right about there. I think. Well, let's go all the way extreme because I want to show you a couple more examples. So the next thing or a couple more features within this tool. So this bokeh here, you can actually choose what type of bokeh you'd like. So you can see, like here in the highlights of the mountains, as I go through these bokehs, you can see that one looks like kind of rings. We have a few different options based on what type of lens you want to emulate. So don't forget to go through those and choose which one you'd like. And you can boost those highlights in the background. See, it's kind of like right behind her here. You can see I'm kind of boosting those highlights as well. Okay, now the reason I went ahead and brought this bokeh blur amount all the way up, I'll bring it down and all the way up again too. What you can see is here on like the right-hand side of this boat, it's actually blurring the boat a little bit. And right over here, it's blurring the boat a little bit. It's getting a little confused. It thinks that the boat is actually the background. But that's not a big deal. All you have to do is go where you see this brush refinement. Now you might need to open this up. So it might look like this when you start it, just brush refinement. Make sure to click that, and then you'll have even more options. Now, we're going to go ahead and choose what's in focus. So let's go ahead and click on focus. And then you just have a brush. And then look at this. I'm just painting what's in focus. So I'm just telling it, hey, you know what? This boat right over here, this actually should be in focus right over here. So I'm just painting that in, and it's going to know, okay, cool. Let's go ahead and bring the amount all the way up. There we go. And I'm going to paint over here on this boat area as well. And look at that.
Just so much control.
Perfectly. And you can kind of blur it in a little bit too if you want to paint in some blur and bring your amount really slow. You can kind of like fade it in as well if you need to. There we go. And let's just tell all that to be in focus there too. So I have all this control now. Let's go ahead and fix the right side of the boat where I can decide what should be in focus and what should be blurred. Now I'm going to lower this blur amount down just a little bit more, and then boom, we have a perfect looking image.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Just so much control, and it just makes this image look so clean. I think that we see that like the chat is also loving this tool as well. Wade said low f-stop for the win. Keys is always in the chat. What is up, Keys? I hope you are well. I hope you are well. They said caught a glimpse of the woman on the rooftops. Must have been very cold when that photo was taken, referring to the last photo that we had worked on. Ooh, Wade made a comment of the foreground blur would be nice with this one too, as another option. Just so many options for how you can just control and focus on utilizing this blur. I think it's so cool.
That is so cool. And you actually can do foreground and background blur. So let's go ahead and choose another image here. There we go. Now what we're going to do is apply this blur amount. There we go. Let's go ahead and apply that blur. Let's crank this up. Okay. And then you can see this focal range here. We actually have a pretty wide range. But if I want to take this and shrink it down, I just go on the side there and shrink it down. Let's make this smaller and smaller and smaller. And then take this middle guy and move it over there. Okay. Now what you can see is it's actually blurring the background and it's blurring the foreground. So you can do both if you want to. There we go. What I prefer though, I think what gives me the best results is clicking on this tool and then just making a selection right around your subject like that. And then it's like, look at this. It nailed it. My subject's perfectly in focus. And then I got the background out of focus and the foreground is out of focus.
Yep.
Look at that. There's the before and that's the after. Now, I mean, that's a big blur. We don't need anywhere near that. And the other thing that I was kind of curious about was like, it works well in those cases where the subject's pretty far from the background. But check it out here. Like these subjects are basically right against the background. Like that's their shadow on the rocks behind them, you know? So you'd be like, is it going to be able to detect the subjects and, you know, figure it out? Well, let's go ahead and hit apply here and see what it gives us. And look at that. It does a great job. Like so good. We're going to go ahead and use this little target tool again. Just going to go ahead and select that subject there. We'll select that subject there.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. There we go. We're going to select okay, cool. Let's extend the range here. So in this case, I had two subjects. So let's just check this out. I had two subjects. So I selected this first subject, put her in focus, but then this next subject, she's a little out of focus.
Yep.
So what we're going to go over here is we're going to take this range and I'm going to click and drag this to the right until she is also in focus. So you can see you can extend that range if you want to, and then I can go ahead and blur the background. And the cool thing is you don't have to blur the background crazy. You know, here's the original, you can see perfectly in focus. You only got to go a little bit and then it's like, boom, you're focusing right on your subject. So I know that, you know, people are going to want to just crank it all the way up because of course, you know, we love to do that.
So why not?
Why not? You know, but even just a little bit like really creates a lot of separation and totally gets the job done.
Absolutely, because you don't want I mean, it depends on what you want at the end of the day. I don't want to say you don't want. Do as you please, y'all. Don't say Idara told you not to do it. But I think the point in this case is to create just a bit of separation between you and your subject and your background, but still keeping some of those details there. Like it is still a great aspect of this photo, the rocks that are the rocks that are behind the subject. So if you completely blurred it out, it's removing that, like that feeling and touch that component has to the photo. So just blurring it a little bit and creating that separation still keeps that element very present, but also make sure that your subjects are the main focus of the image as well.
Definitely, definitely. Now I want to check out this image here because we have our subject. I want to blur the background, but first I want to get rid of this just where it says croissants. I want to get rid of that writing. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll try both of these tools together. So let's go to our remove tool and we'll just like make our brush a little bit smaller and paint right over croissants. I can't believe how easy this is, honestly. I'm just like, you want to get that gone and then blur the background? Well, you know,
like,
you have 45 seconds, you can do both. You know?
You can do both. There's no limitation here.
Don't even worry about it.
Nope. You on a time crunch? We got you.
Got you. Don't even stress, you know. There we go, gone.
Yep.
Gone. And then we're just gonna go back here down to lens blur and click on apply. Apply this blur. There we go. And now I'm gonna grab my little target tool over here, make sure I paint right over my subject's face. Boom. And you can see instantly my background's out of focus. Blur that a little bit more. Wow. And don't forget, you can always play around with different types of bokeh too, which is kind of fun. You can boost the brightness of them, especially if you have like bright lights in the background. You can boost those up for a little added effect there. But
I love
it's just so fun. So here's that before and the after. I mean, we did that in probably 1 minute.
And literally there was literally no time spent. He's made a comment of you can press and hold shift for additional selections. Yes, you can do that. Wade made a comment. Wade said, no, save the croissants.
Save the croissants. Well, if we want to go back in time, we do that because we have our history here. So if we want to save the croissants, we just go back here and then we say, okay, you just want to do the lens blur? No big deal. We'll just turn the lens blur on. We'll go ahead and select our subject. Boom.
Bam.
And the croissants are added back perfectly out of focus, might I add.
Yes. There's two things that I really, really love. I love that I've always really enjoyed the historical portion, the panel that's in Lightroom, because just being able to see your progress and go back where you need to is really, really great. And then I really love that you pointed out the target tool in the lens blur and how that really is so great and how it's so impactful. Like when you're first making, applying the blur to the photo, it's like, okay, I can see the blur, but when you add that target and go over your subject's face, it's so distinctive and so easy to just kind of really make sure that you're focusing on what you need to focus. And I think that's such a great call out that you made. So thank you for that, Aaron. You're dropping nuggets over here.
And thank you to the developers of Lightroom Classic because, boy, you nailed these tools. They're so fun and easy to use. This image is absolutely beautiful. I love it. Let's go ahead and apply it. Just a big old lens blur on it. I mean, look at what it does to that background. It's just absolutely stunning. Let's crank this up a little bit. And then, again, you might not always nail it right on your subject. So we're going to grab our focus tool. And you can just make a selection around like your whole subject, like there. Boom. And it really knows, okay, that's what's going to be in focus. Everything else is knocked out of focus. And I mean, the fact that you could slide this in real time and it looks like that is just, it's out of this world.
That's so great.
There we go. Now, earlier we talked about object removal. And here we got some scaffolding and some ladders and some signs and she's on a rooftop, that sort of thing. But like, honestly, a lot of the time, if we're going to apply this lens blur, a lot of the time you can get rid of this stuff by basically just making it out of focus. You know what I mean? Like, sure, like completely removing it is a thing. There we go. But if you just basically make it out of focus so much at the time, look at that. It's like you're not even worried about it anymore, right? Like there's that before and the after. It's like it goes from competing with your subject like
to just
totally
not a problem.
Not a problem.
No competition.
Exactly. And if you need to, like here, like you can just paint it. So if you need to say paint this amount in focus, just paint it in here where her hand is, that little line there, paint your shoe in focus. And honestly, it's so simple to do. Paint her hair back in focus. There you go. Perfect. You can see it looks fantastic. It looks
Yep.
perfectly real. No stress.
Oh, so
There we
great.
go. And just like that, we're done. I made so many different examples for
I
today because I was
know.
like, these tools are so easy to use and they take 2 seconds, I'm like
They take 2 seconds, and also like the one thing that I like that you've shown in some of the examples is how the tools work together very well. Like you don't have to use just one or the other. You could do all the things. You need to remove something, great, remove it. You want to blur something, go ahead and blur it. You can do a number of different things on the same photo. But I love that you have all these examples to just show how consistent the tool is too. Like it's consistent in all of the examples that you've shown. And they're all different types of examples too. You had 2 subjects, you've had one, different poses, etc. And it's still been very, very impactful and consistent.
Yeah, they knocked it out of the park.
Mhm.
I feel like when the lens blur was in beta, it was really good, but I feel like they perfected it for this general release.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go ahead and apply it on the subject here. Now, this is interesting because the foreground here, the subject skateboard, is out of focus already, and the background was in focus. So we're going to go ahead and nail it here on our subject. There we go. And then we can affect our bokeh amount. So now it's really cool too, because the foreground here is out of focus and the background is out of focus. So we're really just drawn right to our subject.
To the subject, yep.
Yeah, so there's the before. You wind up looking a lot at these buildings, but they're in the after, like, not at all. We got so many great examples for you. All right, this one, I want to do 2 things with this one. I want to take these cables and just remove those, okay? So let's go ahead and start off with our remove tool here. We're just going to go ahead and start by painting these in. There we go. I'm like literally on a trackpad, guys. Like
That's the crazy part about it is like the fact that and editing with a trackpad, y'all, if you know, it's not fun. So the fact that you can do this with your trackpad is so great. Like I've edited with trackpads, my mouse. I've even gotten those like walk home tablets. I try to use it, and I didn't have the patience to really get used to using it, so I tend to go for a mouse. But I love that you can use your trackpad for this and still have very efficient results.
I know, it's so crazy. I'm the same way. I used to use all this other gear too, but these days I'm like, trackpad, why not?
Less
Keep
is
it
more.
light, less is more, man. It's like if you can be on the move with just a laptop, boom,
that is, listen, Aaron, that's the point right there. Sometimes I'm out and about and I'm just editing on my laptop and I don't want to carry a mouse with me. I don't want to carry any other tablets or any other tools. I just want to use the trackpad that is on my laptop. And so I love that I can still get, because sometimes I'll be like, okay, there's some certain things I need to do that I need to edit that maybe I need my mouse. So I'll just wait till I get home, or I'll wait until another time to do it. But now it's like, no, you don't have to wait. You can still get as much of your editing done when you need to.
Yeah, like don't even, you don't even need to wait. You can do this, wherever you are. And I mean, so I used to have like a desktop computer with like a big monitor and all that. And I was like tied to it. I was like, there's no way I'll ever abandon this. I need this to do my work, And now I'm editing on my laptop and I'll just edit like on the couch. I'm just like over here, over there, go to a coffee shop. Because, like, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I don't want to sit in the same place all day.
Same. Yep, that's me.
I'm like 30 minutes over here and then I want to be like laying on my, laying on my couch, and then I want to go, work in the yard a little bit. Like, what I mean?
That is exactly how I feel.
Yeah. Because it just like changes the energy too. It's so easy to just feel like I don't know, like stale or like, just being in the same place all day. I feel like, especially sitting down, like I like to stand up and move.
Stand and move around. Yep, exactly. Especially since we've been in this like post-COVID era, like the amount of sitting I do. Sometimes I'm just like, sitting and being at home. Sometimes I don't want to just edit at
Yeah.
home. Sometimes I want to be out and about. I want to, if maybe I'm on a road trip. Sometimes I've done that too, where I've been in the car and someone else is driving and I need to get some editing done. I want to be able to do it on my laptop while I'm in the car. And so I think this really allows you to have so much more access to things. Like, of course, like I believe when you're using like all the generative AI, you still need to be connected to a hotspot or Wi-Fi to utilize it, of course. So I do always make sure I have the hotspot with me, but it's just so easy now. I can do it anywhere.
Literally anywhere, which is so fun. So let's go ahead and check this out. The before and after, we just moved all those cables. Look how much more like free and open this image is in the after. He looks like he's floating. It's really cool. So let's go ahead here. We're going to just take off this remove and we're going to go right into lens blur and click on apply. There we go. Beautiful. I don't even want to go like that much, just a little bit. And let's make sure again, we go and find our subject.
And I really like this too, because I think he's made a comment where they said, I think those cables looked perfect for the composition. And I think what I think is really great about this example is that you have created two different vibes. Like there's the cables that were utilized that created a perfect composition photo, but then it's like, okay, let's see what else we can get. Removing the cables, adding that bokeh creates this like more so floating effect in the photo. So it's like, depending on what your style is or where you're going as an artist, you can decide where you want to lean into it, but you have the tools to kind of just push yourself and see what kind of, like you have so much freedom essentially to really push these images.
Exactly. And the choice is up to you. You got these wonderful tools. You can use them however, feels right to you. Yeah, and I completely agree. The composition was beautiful before. We definitely didn't have to remove anything at all, but
we
so
can.
nice that if we want to,
we
can. No problem. We just paint right over them and they're gone.
They're gone.
Yeah. And this is really cool too, because you can see our subject is, this is quite like a dynamic pose that our subject has. And the lens blur was able to correctly identify the subject. And then look at this, it's blurring the background. But as I click on this, I don't know if you can see, but it's starting here in the back and it's coming forward. So as I do this, you can see it like moves forward in space. So it really is like figuring out the depth of the image. And it's blurring the things that are farther away first, and then it kind of moves forward. So
moving towards the sun. That's a great point. I didn't even pay attention to that fact in the beginning at all, but like that is such a like really specific detail that's really cool.
Yeah, it's crazy dynamic. Such a cool feature. All right, and then this image is interesting because we actually have a lot going on in this image. So let's go ahead and see how lens blur does on this. We're going to click here on apply. There we go. And you can see it blurred the background a little bit. I'm going to just crank up the blur a little bit more so we can see what we're doing here. But what this did is it brought the focal range really wide. So what I'm going to do is click here and we're just going to bring this focal range back down to be actually pretty shallow depth of field. Now, when I did this, see, I'm way over here on the left. The left hand basically represents closer to you, and the right side of this represents farther from you. So now I can take this and just click and drag it and move it to identify my subject. And look at this, it's going to blur the foreground too. So it's going to blur the front of the image and the back of the image to just find my subjects. And there we go. So there's that before and the after. You can see it really makes such a big difference because, this is a relatively busy image, but in the after, you can see now we're much more focused on the subject and, well, both subjects, human and dog. This is so much fun. Here we go. We've got another great example here. Let's go ahead and apply this lens blur. Fantastic.
Bam.
Yeah.
Within seconds.
Within seconds, it nails it. And it's not just, I don't know if anyone has experience with like Gaussian blur or something like that, but the blur that it's doing in the background is a much more complicated blur than like Gaussian blur. It's actually like, it's very much like emulating the blur of lens. Like here you can see, like these like tall, small little white areas, like these highlights. As I increase the blur, you can see it basically turns them into circles, right?
Yep.
So it's taking all the highlights and information, and it's blurring everything just like it would be blurred from the camera.
Yes, and I think that's such a great point, Aaron, because it's like that's what differentiates this tool to just using any kind of the blur tools that specifically existed before. Doing the Gaussian blur that wouldn't have, it's just such a specific attention to detail. So when we call this a lens blur, it is a lens blur. It is taking what we are used to, what we see when we're shooting with different types of lenses, and emulating that in the software. So I think it's so great, and such a strong attention to detail from the developers to really be like, no, this is still going to emulate it. Because you don't want it to, you don't want people to look at it and be like, oh wow, this looks so fake. It still is very in line with what we're used to seeing. Someone's gonna probably say, hey, I wonder what lens did you use when you were shooting this photo? This is so cool. You know.
I use the Lightroom lens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. Let's try to do a bunch of object removal here. I want to see if we can get rid of all these cars. Yeah, it's so true, because like I've tried a bunch of different like lens blur tools. Like there's other companies that have done it. There's other programs, but nothing comes close to this. Honestly, this is if you need to do lens blur in post-production, Lightroom is by far the best tool that I've used. Yeah, it's better than any Photoshop lens blur option, and it's better than any of the third party that I've used. I know we're on like an Adobe stream, but that's
I know.
It is the truth.
It's true. The truth. We don't lie. We don't lie, okay?
It just is true. I've used a bunch of them, and this, this really is it just works the best, There we go.
And the way that you are cleaning up these cars is so mind-blowing to me, because I'm just like, there were so many cars.
I know, like while we're chatting over here, like I'm not even trying that hard. I'm like literally, we're having a conversation. And I'm just like painting over this image.
Like just painting the cars away.
Hit a button and it's gone, I'm like, okay, these I don't want those things in there either. Let's get rid of these,
This is so, I just love it, because it's like the image before and what you have now, and just again the possibilities and the ways that we can use these tools as creatives is so amazing. Because before you would just shoot and you'd be like, oh wow, like I took this great portrait. She's dressed all cute. She's walking down the street, but there's so many cars, but I just gotta, deal with it, Now you might have a client come back and be like, hey, can I remove these cars? Like, I don't really like the way it looks. Yeah, no problem.
Or you can say, well, it's going to take me a few hours.
Exactly.
But I'll give it a shot,
Actually, that's what you should say. That is a good point, Aaron. We don't want people thinking that, oh, I can just remove anything and everything out of Photoshop, okay, or out of Lightroom.
Yeah. All right, I charge $100 an hour. It's probably going to take me 4 hours.
Yep. Use it to your, wink, wink. We don't want to tell you what to do, but we don't need the clients knowing that we got these tools to our advantage.
Yeah, or maybe you don't charge them any extra money, but just, send it to them like, half a day later and then keep them.
Exactly.
If you send it to them 5 minutes later, they're going to think it's not that big of a deal to do it.
Exactly. And you know what's so funny? There is always, this is like running joke with just in photography in general. People be like, oh, can you just remove that? Remove it. And people think it's so easy to remove it. Like now, yes, it's easy to remove, but they don't need to know that.
Don't tell them.
No, don't tell them.
That's so funny. I know, right? Like it actually did take me 5 minutes, but I want you to think it took a lot longer.
Yep. I want you to be grateful.
Yeah, be grateful, think to yourself that you couldn't have done this. You need me.
Yep.
All right, let's check out this before and after. That's the before and the after.
Wow.
How crazy is that?
Wow.
Like all this object removal, all this lens blur. It looks like we woke up at, 6 in the morning when there were no cars on the street, or, like close the road down temporarily or something like that. Like And you
Absolutely
wouldn't even know
beautiful.
it. Like you see the after, that doesn't look like it's photoshopped at all. It just
Mm-mm.
looks like
It looks
it
very
just looks straight out
natural.
of camera. And you're
Yep.
like, cool, that's what we want. You see the before, and it's clearly that's not what you want.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's life. Most of the time, they're just gonna be cars in the
Yep.
background, you know?
Yep.
But
What can
now
you do?
the evidence is gone. Evidence is gone, and it's easier than ever. This one, we don't
Yep.
need to remove anything. Let's just apply a lens blur. I think we got like just about 3 minutes left on this broadcast,
Yes,
right? Something
yes.
like that, you know?
We're getting ready to close, y'all. We are getting ready to close. So Aaron and I will be
Yeah.
hopping off, but we have still some more streams for you guys throughout the day. So if you guys have any questions,
Yes.
please be sure to drop them in chat. Wade, thank you so much for dropping Aaron's website, phlearn.com in the chat. Please go ahead and reach out to Aaron and kind of follow him on every platform if you can. Because Aaron, thank you so much for just joining us and being so
It's been a
gracious on this
blast.
stream. You've shown us so much and taking your time to kind of cover these new Lightroom tools. We are so grateful.
I've had an absolute blast. Can you believe we've gone through like
How many
almost
photos have we done? Like
almost let's see, 23 images we edited during this stream.
that
You
is
know,
so
like
crazy.
all these things, starting off with these, and we can go back here. That's the thing is like all this workflow is like earlier we removed this thing in the background.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back later at any time and be like, oh, you want some bokeh in there too? You want this out of focus?
Yep.
Don't even worry about it. We got you,
Yep.
Boom. Out of focus,
Yep.
out of mind,
Yep.
Here we go. Let's go ahead and apply this out of focus. There we go. Let's blur all that stuff into
Out
oblivion.
of focus, out of mind.
There we go. I'm
Oh,
not even worried about that stuff over there.
not even spending any time doing it. And the fact that we have done 20, what do you say, 23 images in a matter of 1 hour is with the level of removal and lens blurring that we have done is unheard of.
It's
That is
so
unheard
much
of.
fun. Look at this. To come back to our
Yes.
classic. I think we should end on this image because
Yes,
I
we should
love it
end on
so
this
much.
image. This image is so great. I love it. The guy, I need some styling tips from him because he is a whole vibe. That's what I want to look like when I get older. I want to be him when I grow up.
Yes, please. I know, 100%. This jacket's
Yes.
got this turquoise on one side and pink on the other. Like,
Like,
boom.
where do you even get that jacket?
I don't even know, man. I haven't seen anything like that. This guy's got the hookup.
Honestly. Awesome. You guys, if you have any questions, I think we've kind of gotten everything in the chat. Thank y'all so much for always being so just, active in the chat, commenting the questions, comments, and concerns. And thank you, Aaron, for going through all of these photos. And want to encourage y'all to utilize these tools, okay? The developers at Lightroom, at Adobe, they work so hard to give us these tools that just aid in our experiences as creators. And so I am really, really excited to go and get myself into editing in my house, in the car,
Yes.
in the coffee
At
shop.
the coffee shop.
Yes. And playing around with these tools. So as we talk, just a quick reminder and recap of all the new tools that we have. We have the Generative Remove tool where we were able to remove people, objects, things that we do not want, unnecessary tools. It is not new to Adobe. Of course, that was in Photoshop previously, but now it is in Lightroom. We have the lens blur tools that we utilize to kind of focus on how we can really remove our background from focus in on our subjects. So great. So I want to encourage y'all to utilize this. There's also the adaptive presets. So go ahead and take some time and play around with these tools as they are now available to you. And I want to encourage y'all to stick around. This is not the last stream of the day. So please do not log off. Make sure you stick around for our next segment, Lifestyle Photography Perfected with Sin Legos, as she reveals how she's going to use these new features in Lightroom to enhance her lifestyle photography. So please stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Sin Legos will be joining us in just a few minutes. And yep, until next time, we're signing off. Aaron and I are signing off.
Thanks, Adara. It was a blast. Thanks for
Of
everyone joining
course.
us.
Thank you. Bye.
everyone. Welcome. My name is Sin Lagos. I am so happy to be here with everyone. I know today we were full of so many wonderful streams. If you've been keeping up, you're the goats. I've been keeping up since the morning with Terry. It's been awesome. So hopefully you've been inspired to jump into Adobe Lightroom wherever you are. If you're at lunch, if it's after hours, jump in. You know, it doesn't have to be too much expectation. Just jump in and try it out. Okay, so for those of you who may not know me, my name is Sin Lagos. Let's jump in and get to know each other. Okay, so my name is Sin Lagos. I'm a photographer. I'm a mentor of design, video, and photography. I love being able to give back to this wonderful community who has given me so much. This is my work here. This is my lifestyle work. You're welcome to explore it. This is on sinlagos.com, where I also provide all of the different resources for your journey as a mentee. Right? I've been doing this for quite a bit, and it's been quite exciting to always push my boundaries. As you can see, I've explored a little bit of everything, and I think if you know me already, you know that I don't like to limit myself. It's really important for me to always find a new way to express myself, whether that's through what I photograph or the tools that I use in order to create these beautiful scenes. So today we're going to be exploring Adobe Lightroom and most of all, these incredible new features, some of which are powered by AI. So if you've been following the streams today, hopefully you've already kind of gotten a little bit of an insider. But if you haven't, I'm going to walk you through how I use these new features, how I use Adobe Lightroom as a whole to really boost my workflow as a photographer in lifestyle, photographer as a street photographer. There's a lot that I'm navigating here, just like you are, especially in the realm of AI. So I'm welcoming you to have this conversation. I can watch the chat. I already see Keys in here, some of my favorite people. Robert, I see Apurba. What's up, people? I love it. So I would just want to welcome you to have this mindset of open-mindedness, because in photography, for me, that question always arises. How can I keep the integrity of my images while still maintaining a workflow where I can edit, improve, enhance the story I want to tell? Okay, that's a very important question I'm frequently asking myself along the way. So today we're going to edit a few photos that I got to capture here in Austin, Texas. I'm based in Austin, Texas, and these photos are amazing. I love the serendipity of them all because none of these photos were really pre-planned. Okay, these are moments where I meet people, I ask them for a portrait, and I get a chance to connect with them via visual language as a whole. And that has always been the cherry on top of any journey in photography I've ever taken, is when I can connect with other people without those language barriers, but instead with the arts. So in this photo, I can see so many things that I love, but just as I look back, I have it in full frame right now, just press that letter F, I can see some things that are taking away from my focus. So it's pulling that focus away from my subject matter, which is really what I want, right? I want her in this amazing vehicle, which I was like, how did I just bump into this? It's Austin, folks. You can bump into just amazing setups everywhere because people have so many characteristics here, and I love to explore it. So I don't like some of these things here that are pulling focus. Now, looking back on my traditional workflow, I've been doing post editing on my digital photography for quite some time. I find it to be absolutely a step in the right direction in my process. However, in my traditional workflow, in order to remove this U-box thing that's right here, U-Haul, U-box, okay, we've got branding, which is not benefiting the story. If it was a branding that had something to do with the time and place, I probably would have kept it. I love keeping things like American flags or posts those type of things because they do mark a time. But something like this, I feel like it's taking away from this energy and this vibe, right? So I would, in the past, in my traditional workflow, I would right click and hit edit in Photoshop. And when I click edit in Photoshop, that would bring me into Photoshop where I can use generative fill. So we all know we can use generative fill, Adobe Firefly 3, right? So even better in Photoshop, especially Photoshop beta. So this is what I would commonly do. What's cool about this is that if I save it, it will save the edits. However, the grand news of today is that I no longer need to do that. Albeit I love Photoshop, we all do, right? I no longer need to do that because I get to sit here natively in Adobe Lightroom and continue my workflow. So I'm gonna jump in here into the remove tool. It's that little eraser right here. Under here, we have a couple tools, some of which I never paid attention to in the past after dismay of not getting the results that I wanted. But today that changes because today we're having the opportunity to introduce generative AI. So now this tool is boosted because it's powered by AI. That's awesome, isn't it? That's what we want to hear. And I know a lot of you folks are out there wondering, should I introduce AI in my photography? I've had that question plenty of time. This is my workflow to guide you through those questions, okay? So here in this tool, we got the remove tool to remove objects, to remove things that are a little bit more complex. I'm not going to click generative AI just yet, okay? We are native in Adobe Firefly. All good. And let's see here how we would look without the power of AI. So I'm removing that generative click right there, and I'm going to just select it so we can see a preview of what happens. Now, what's interesting about this scene or this thing I'm trying to remove is that it's fairly complex. So it doesn't become a good candidate for removing, right? So you would have to really zoom in here with the traditional tool that we had previously to today. And we would have to go and make very minute selections to help it out. But we don't want that. We want the other way around. We want the tool to help us out so we have more time to do creative things. So what I'm going to do this time is select generative AI this time. And as I select, a thing with generative AI, if you've used it in Photoshop before, is that we do not need to create a very precious selection as we would have to in the past with a pen tool. In fact, selecting a little bit more of the context of your space, it's helpful. Just a little bit, nothing too intense. And as you can see there, I ended up removing, right? We've got two brushes here, add and remove. Let's select add to just add a little bit more context right there below. So in this case, I can refine it by using my brush and decreasing and increasing the size. Keith says, Army Jeep, quite a rare sight. I know. It was, I think it's a classic. There's a lot of things here. I was just like, hold on, this is beautiful. As I'm taking the photo though, I'm gonna hit apply here. Oh, last thing I wanna say about this. Whenever I'm editing, one of the things I used to find cumbersome is if I have a background that is red, this red selection is not very helpful. If you want to change it so you have more visibility, there you go. Nice little pro tip there in case you didn't know that existed, that little dot right there. Okay, so yes, I love, let's hit apply here as we have our combo. I love that I get to explore this new city that I live in, get to connect with other people, and also find these amazing gems, right? Not only did I find this amazing person that was willing to have their portrait taken by me, but I was also able to find this extra setting. So I want to be able to say, hey, this photo, let's take this photo from maybe a B+ to an A+, right? That's always the goal. So in here, because I'm using generative fill in a space that is not necessarily her, it's not necessarily the vehicle. You know, there's certain things that I have to keep in mind in terms of ethics. What do I want to use generative fill in that is not hurting my image necessarily? Because I'm not telling a story that isn't true, right? It's different. If I was maybe doing a commercial for U-Haul, maybe we would have kept that, right? So in this case, we have all of these alternatives right here, variations 1, 2, 3, just as we do in Photoshop. And this just gives us alternatives, background sceneries. The background is often the background for a reason. It's not meant to call out attention unless you're purposely trying to create a technique where that's the goal. Not this time. This time I want this mid-ground, foreground to be the main thing. So that's what I'm doing here. And I think that's working really well. That's pretty. I like that. That works for me. And you can see we have 3 options. Always explore all 3. You never know what works. As you can see, some of these didn't quite work for me, but you have a 3rd option in there. If it doesn't work, you're welcome to hit refresh and that will generate once more. So let's continue removing some things here. I see in here, this is looking good so far. I see in here, I have this little guy here. I don't even know what it is. It's not adding value. If it had a little bit of a nudge to something, if my viewer can look at that and say, it makes them think of something, then I might keep it. But if it's not the case, I'm not going to keep it. I'm going to remove distractions. And that's my goal. How can I take this from B+ to a true A+? I see some more things here on the right-hand side, on the outermost layer. Again, just obstructions. When I look at an image, I'm often thinking to myself, how can I make this more minimal? That's my style. Something I developed over the years, bringing a little bit of quietness into an otherwise complex environment. And that works for me. So hopefully you can find something that works for you in terms of style. Okay, so already I've done some really cool things to this photo, right? So if we were to look at the before, it's pretty wild, right? Before, after. It's a big difference, right? We are not in Photoshop. I just got to say that out loud because I know we align generative fill with Photoshop because we love Photoshop. Why not? But now it's in Lightroom and I get lost in Lightroom. I get lost in my workflow here, often in the editing zone over on YouTube. And I love getting lost for hours. The workflow shouldn't be disrupted if we can help it, right? All right, so we did that one and I'm liking it so far. Let's move on to a quick little tip here I want to explore with you, right? I love me some presets. And right now here on Adobe Lightroom, we have recommended presets based on your image. Again, just using our tools to our advantage so we can navigate different possibilities, right? Look at this. That changes the game. Now I understand if you want to explore this with your own artistic fingerprint, it's fine. But especially when you're just starting to learn, it's really important to see the possibilities as a case study almost. You want to dissect them and learn and let them leave an impression and learn from them. So I often find myself seeing if there's another opportunity here for me to do something else. Right? So those are under the recommended section. Under premium, I want to send you over to this little section here. It's called adaptive blur background. And that's going to help blur our background, but it's adaptive to each photo. So for example, if I click strong, you can see what happens even as I hover over it, right? We can do bubble, geometric. And if you've been listening to the streams today, you're probably a little bit familiar with the bubble, geometric. That refers to our bokeh options. And this, as it stands, just like all our other presets, we can reduce the amount. So we can introduce something a little bit more subtle, but there it is, right? So something like that. And of course, these are adaptive blurs that are representative of one of our favorite tools, at least for me. It's been in early access for quite a bit. And let me close this here. There you go. You're going to find it down here all the way at the bottom. It's called Lens Blur, right? And it allows us to adjust our backgrounds or foregrounds, midgrounds. It works just like our lenses do, right? I've got my camera right here, and I often find myself in a lot of little hiccups, especially when I'm photographing the streets. So let's explore a little bit more of that with these photos right here. So I've got this photo as an example. I'm going to show you my camera for a second. So when I have this camera right here, I'm often thinking to myself, okay, I want shallow depth of field. I paid for a lens that gives me shallow depth of field. I'm going to push it to the gamut, right? I'm going to do like f1.2. You don't always want to do that. That's my dog saying hello. You don't always want to have to do that. So what you want to think about is, how can I keep all the focus? So let's go over here back to our screen, and I'm going to explain to you what I mean by that. So here's a case in which I've kind of hurt this image. It could have been a better image, right? So give me a second here. Let's see. Okay, so then once I came over to Lightroom, I found out that my focus ended up on her shoes. Wonderful if this was a sneaker ad. However, it's not. In fact, I was really disheartened that I didn't get this photo. And this is one of a couple where my depth was just too small, right? And it didn't end up in the right location, unfortunately. It's a bright day. I can't even look at my screen to be able to verify. There's a lot that goes into it. And in this moment, this is not a professional model. This is a friend that is willing to take a photo. So I'm dealing with a lot of things. I'm juggling a lot of elements. So instead of doing that, I suggest a good recommendation from here on out, especially with these tools and post editing, is to shoot with an aperture that gives you more focus. So you don't have to go all the way up to 11, 14. Reserve that for landscapes. That's fine. You can do it a little bit more reduced, but there's no need to do 1.2 if you can help it. This way, when you're just run and gun, right? Let's use our presets real quick. Those recommended presets that I just showed you, and brighten this image, right? It takes us from 0 to 10%, which is great. We love speed. And let's get back in here into our blur tool. Okay, so what I wanted to explain in this scenario here, we've got way more focus. We have focus all the way to the end. And that's wonderful because now I can work on where the focus is much more than if everything was blurry. It's very hard to come back from blurry. It's not a lot of information left, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. So now that I've added a little bit of color with the recommended presets from the Lightroom community, let's go into our lens blur tool. Oh, wait, before we do that, let's remove a little quick nudge right here to remove something we don't want. Boom. Always read the tips. Size your eraser to be slightly larger than the object you want to remove, right? That was our tip number 1 earlier. These tips really do help, especially if you're just starting in your AI journey, introducing AI to boost your creativity. So let's go over back to lens blur and explore lens blur for a little bit. Okay, let's apply lens blur. And immediately it's estimating the depth of this image. So depth meaning background, midground, foreground. So with our focal range established, right, we can see the visualized depth in here. And let's click it on. Anything that is warmer is going to be in focus. Anything that starts to be cooler, right? Cooler. Awesome, right? It's going to be blurred. So not just the purple, anything cool. So this is about it's just a little bit blurred, but not that much, but it's not entirely focused. What is entirely focused? What is the warmest tone, right? So this is how we're going to watch our visualized depth. Now we can move that depth with the focus range, and we can reduce the depth of this image. How shallow do we want it, right? By making this even smaller, the selection even smaller. Okay, now let's remove that and give it a second. This is really important. Generative AI needs internet. So if you're working on the iPad, you will have to use the internet for something like this, especially with the Generative Remove tool. Cool. So as you can see, let's do a quick full framing here. As you can see, it runs a little bit on your system, and it's kind of worth it in this case. All right, so you can see now this image has that beautiful depth, very creamy depth in this case. And then this is our default bokeh, and it's looking wonderful. My focus is directly towards her, and we're doing everything so that my portrait goes from a level C, level B to a level A+++. We always want that. All right, so let's get back here and explore another photo as we move through these scenes. All right, so I've got this scene right here. Pride is about to come up on, believe this, I took this on, let's see, when did I take this? Let's go in here on the letter I. I took this on June 18th, okay? All of your info is in here. It shows me how I photographed this. There's so much little goodies in here in Adobe Lightroom. Okay, so when I squint, when I look at this image, if I go full frame and I squint and I step back for a second, I often do this, by the way. I love just looking at my screen and thinking, is this my hero image? I'm revisiting these photos from last year because these tools are urging me to do that, because there are images where I was a little disheartened that things didn't go my way. So we have a street photo here, lifestyle, this is happening. I'm trying to place her in a place where her the visibility of the lighting is good, where her head is not being obstructed too much. But I squint here and I still have these obtrusive things. We've got a giant tripod over here. I don't know what it is. I think it's a tent. We've got a giant car, which I attempted, as you can see from the last time, to remove the license plate. It was an ick result. I did not like it. I stopped there and I left it alone to collect digital dust. That's really unfortunate. Never want to do that. Let's go in here and add a little preset just for kicks and giggles. And I'm going to go into my presets. I love creating presets. If you want to have presets, free resources on my website are always available. So join the newsletter. I love sharing these. It's just so much fun to make them anyhow. So some of these are perfect, I think, especially for digital photography. Some of them are focused on phone photography, so that it might not go with this one. So I think I liked, let's see, I really liked this. There was an earlier one right here. That's looking good. And just like the other ones, there's some adjustment. Oh, this is Sin and Mo's wedding. Okay, perfect. So let's go with that one. Let's increase the exposure just a tad bit here and close that. Okay, let's jump into lens blur. This is going to be our last run here. So let's jump into lens blur. No, you know what? Let's remove these things. So now we're in a speed run. This is an actual reflection of what happens whenever I'm actually in a hurry. And oftentimes, if I'm doing things for clients, I'm always in a hurry. Very important. You know, if you're doing event coverage, deadlines are so vital, and being able to keep up your style, your refined photography standards like that, you don't ever want to let that go because of a timeline, right? So let's apply this here. It's really vital that you find tools that are working for you. Okay, the tools will always change, but what you want to say remains the same. The story remains the same. Those are the things that you love. Those are the things that pull you. And I just encourage you to try it all before you say, no, that's not for me. Though I want you to make up your own opinions about what works for your photography. So we've got these really cool tools here. So as you can see, it adds context clues. So it sees a balloon here. It says, well, that's a good one there too. Let's hit another refresh just for kicks and giggles and try another option. And it says you can refine anything afterwards. Is thinking maybe I want a car. No, I don't really want a car. So I'm just gonna leave it at the first one. Okay, let's hit refresh one last time, saying you can skip automatically entering refinement by holding command while you're resting. There you go. That's the one I want. And as I continue to apply and change my edits, hey, what's up, Sean? Thank you for making it on this stream. I love everybody for joining live and learning together. This is awesome. So now I know that the background is still something I want to blur out. So I want to keep the context of there were people. That's fine by me. I like that. I know they're going to look good in the blurring element. So let's go into lens blur, apply lens blur, and you're going to see the magic happen. Awesome. I mean, look at that. That is so much better than where we started. We can still see the people. You can understand this is a parade. This is a celebration. It's absolutely wonderful. And these tools just like really end up helping me even for photos that I've taken in the past. So I'm going to be enjoying my time here. So folks, thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Sin Lagos. I welcome you to peruse through my website, find out what I'm up to next. And thank you for joining us today, because this has been so much fun learning about all the wonderful tools in Adobe Lightroom. Adobe is full of so many cool things. So till next time, ciao.